Did you want me to kick it off?
Right on.
Okay. I'd like to welcome you to the Pacifica Fightback Town Hall. My name is Lawrence Reyes. I'm on the local station board at KPFK, and I'm also a P&B director for the Pacifica National Board, as is Jim Diggerman from WBAI. I just want to take a moment to recognize where I'm at. I am at Tomba, Gabalino, Chumash, Hachiman, and Quiche, unceded land here in Los Angeles. And I just want to be able to recognize that. And I also want to highlight that today is the 17th anniversary of the murder of Gilberto Ojeda Rios, a leader of the Macheteros in Puerto Rico on September the 23rd, which is also the day that Puerto Rico seceded and declared their liberation from Spain. So it's not unlike for the FBI and the CIA to murder people on our ancestors and our dates of remembrance, if you will. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Sister Tage so she can introduce herself, and then we'll go to the land back ceremony by our Sister Josie Tiwa Tenorio. Sister Tage.
Thank you, Brother Lawrence. Greetings, everybody. My name is Sister Tage Graywall, and I'm a producer with the program on KPFK Freedom Now. I'm also the former chair of the Los Angeles KPFK board. I chaired for about 3 years. And I do want to also give the land acknowledgement from where I'm at today in Reno, Nevada. Give thanks to the Washoe, Paiute, and Shoshone peoples. And I'm looking forward to learning from everybody some more today. And a lot of my work is centered in teaching secondary mathematics. So I used to bring students to KPFK, just so much participation from so many community members coming to the high schools. And so, we're fighting for the youth out here. So with that, I'm gonna pass it back to Brother Lawrence.
Thank you. And I'd like to welcome everyone. If you could put in the chat your name, what station, and what land you are seated on that's unseated, that'll be great. With that, I'm a parkling it to this panel is in regards to our relatives in Africa, our siblings, let me say siblings, our siblings in Palestine, Africa, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Ukraine, and just the globe, if you will, the planet. So with that, I'm gonna go to the ceremony by our sister Josie Tiwa Tenorio. Josie, take it away.
Good morning, Esqueli. My name is Josie Tenorio. I'm come from Hood-Villa, from Hopi, Arizona. Just want to thank every single one of you for it's an honor to be here with amongst all of you. As you all know, we have a great rising epidemic of missing, murdered Indigenous, Native women and men and Two-Spirited, but we come all together. We are raising awareness, and also not only for our Indigenous families, but also throughout the world, because a lot of our women go missing and are being murdered. And we are seeking justice, just as we're seeking justice for our relatives. We are seeking justice for our Leonard Peltiers and many that were wrongfully incarcerated as well. And we're also seeking justice for our loved ones that have been murdered. And with that being said, I just want to thank every single one of you for taking the time to come here, introduce yourselves, and being part of this beautiful circle that is amongst all colors of all people coming together in unity. And I want to sing a song before we get started, if that's okay. It's only a minute, and that would be all. It's from my own home, from Hopi, and it's called "Rising Together" and "Rising Together Towards the Sun." And would that be okay, Brother Lawrence?
Yes, please, Sister Josie. Thank you for the honor.
Thank you. Well, hey, y'all. Hey, well, now, hey, y'all, then it one, and it one time, hey, y'all. Wanna, hey, they want in my door. Wanna hit, te wanna mato. Te wanna mato. Te wanna mato. Te wanna mato. Wanna hit. Squally, and we to all of you. Thank you all very much for allowing me to share a little piece of my own home and my village. And to all of you, may all you guys have a safe, beautiful day. Here in New Mexico at UNM, we are here to meet with families from our missing, murdered, Indigenous, Native women and men and two-spirited. And we are to come together and form a circle, for a healing circle for our families. So with that being said, take it on to Mr. Brother Lawrence here. Scully.
Thank you. Asquali, halom, as we say in the Araqua language, which means relatives. The reason, one of the purposes of this town hall is to highlight what Pacifica Fightbacks believes is things that are not being aired on all 5 of our stations and our affiliates. We are highlighting our siblings from Palestine in regards to what is happening there, which we don't hear much of on the Pacifica Radio Network and the affiliates. We are highlighting Cuba and the blockade, the criminal blockade that currently exists. Puerto Rico, which has been suffering from colonialism over 500 years. Africa, our mother Africa, in regards to the continent and the riches in the continent and the way it is being stripped of its natural resources. And also the Ukraine and just the state of the planet and the way imperialism has impacted our planet and the state of these many nations and just the planet completely. So with that, I'm introduce our first speaker, our Palestinian sibling, Linda Sansu. I hope I got the name right. Assalamu alaikum. And with that, I'll give the floor to Linda. Thank you, Linda, for being here.
Thank you. Alaikum assalam, which is peace and blessings be upon you all. I am deeply honored and blessed to be here with all of you. Again, my name is Linda Sarsour, and I'm a Palestinian American organizer from the greatest place on earth, which is Lenape land, but also for me, Brooklyn, New York. And I'm just deeply honored to be here with workers of Pacifica Network. I'm actually a host of What's Going On with Linda Sarsour on WBAI 99.5 FM in New York City. And the reason why I'm here is to basically say that people like me don't get these types of platforms. And it is people like you, people who want to center the voices of the most marginalized people, people who want to center voices of those around the world who are impacted by imperialism, by occupation, by oppression. This is why this network exists. It is precisely why this network needs to exist, because as you know, voices like mine, voices who uplift and center the most marginalized people, those who are willing to challenge the powerful and the billionaires and the corporations and the mainstream media, will not find ourselves on the mainstream media. And for me, I don't want to talk to everybody. I'm not trying to talk to everybody. I want to talk to people who I can insert my voice into this larger left conversation that we have, because even Palestinians find themselves sometimes marginalized amongst the marginalized. We unfortunately live in a country that has so much influence when it comes to the conversation on what's happening in Palestine to Palestinians. Our taxpayer dollars as Americans goes to fund the occupation of the Palestinian people. The propaganda machine and the narrative about the state of Israel here has really oftentimes influenced even some progressives about where and what positions to take on what's happening in Palestine. And not only does the narrative influence people on where they stand or how courageous they feel, about saying that they are against the occupation, that Israel is an apartheid government, literally by definition. I mean, if I had to put a picture of in 2022 of an apartheid state, Israel would be that apartheid state. There's no question about that Israel being an apartheid state. And unfortunately, being able to make those claims and provide factual information can be weaponized against us and our movements, which is why it is important for us to, when people say, don't preach to the choir, I always say the choir needs to keep practicing how to sing, and that we have to continue to instill courage in one of us to ensure that we are still centering the most marginalized people. Just as we're sitting here today, the demolition of Palestinian homes is happening today, right now. The brutal occupation of the Palestinian people is happening right now. There are young teenage boys being murdered at the hands of the state of Israel right now. There are people who do not have access to clean water right now. There are people who do not have access to healthcare right now. And so we have to understand our role and our responsibility, which is why we have to work together as workers of a network like Pacifica, of WBAI, to ensure the integrity that is left in media, that is the integrity left in the platforms we have for political education. The bottom line is we are far too few, and there aren't many platforms, especially those who take corporate sponsorships and those who, unfortunately, because of the financial crisis of the media, particularly print media and others, they are starting to be in a place where they're backing away from radical positions. They're backing away from marginalized people. They're backing away from talking about policing and abolition and talking about anti-war and anti-imperialism because they need the money to survive. And what I do believe wholeheartedly, and I say this to people all across the country, they made us believe that we don't have, that we need them to survive. And I don't believe that. I believe that we are all we got and we're all we need. And as we build our membership with politically conscious people across the country, with teachers, with unions, with labor, with activists, with organizers, with our loved ones, those who love us and love our courage and love what we are inserting into the conversation, we could survive. And people say this all the time, and it sounds cliche, but they say the people united will never be defeated. I believe that. I believe if we united across stations, we united our workers, we united those who love and support us and want to hear our voices, we could really build something even more powerful than what you all have already built over decades. And so for me, I think about something that happened to me recently. Many of you may have read this New York Times article. And I just want to be clear here. This article for me is not about the Russians. I don't want to talk about the Russians. It's not about the Russians. It just shows the vulnerability of American politics and discourse, that any government, I don't care who the government is, decides that they can come sow discord amongst us. And what for me, that really was a cautionary tale. And when I think about disinformation in America, the disinformation campaigns around COVID, around policing, around the Black Lives Matter movement, around refugees and immigrants and migrants at the border, I think of Pacifica and I think of WBAI and I think of my own show, being able to center the voices of organizers, of directly impacted people so that we could really hear what's going on. And not only do we hear what's going on, but actually get to the solutions. And I say this, and I've said this in many places before, those closest to the pain are closest to the solutions. We will not get to a solution on Israel-Palestine without centering the solutions and voices of the Palestinian people. We will not get to solutions around policing in America and racial justice without centering and allowing Black people to lead us, Indigenous people to lead us, other people of color and marginalized people to lead us. And so for me, it's about whose voices get heard and where do they get heard. And if we have to fight to get marginalized people's voices heard on Pacifica, we really got a problem. And we might as well pack it up and we just all go home. And so this is worth the fight. And I just want to say I'm in unequivocal solidarity with Pacifica and their workers. This station, this network belongs to the people. And if that's not the case, then we might have to figure something out here. But I think for now, I'm here to be with all of you to fight because my people need this platform. I need this platform. I want to be able to be part and contribute to conversations and narratives around what does it truly mean to be anti-war? What does it truly mean to be anti-imperialist? You know, I think a lot of times we hear that terminology, but what does it actually mean to us? And for some people, it's about saying, it's not just saying no to war, it's about practical conversations and actions around being anti-war. It's similar when people say, you can't say you're not racist, you got to be anti-racist. Anti-racist requires action. It requires conversation. It requires progress. And so I'm just here to say I'm grateful to all of you. I want you to see me not only as someone whose voice should be centered in the conversations we're having right now in this very cruel world of war-hungry, profit-hungry folks that we live amongst, unfortunately, but to see me as an ally. And if I can use my voice and my platform to support you all in ensuring that Pacifica continues to be a network for the people, by the people, supported by the people, that's why I'm here. So I appreciate you all. And I want to send solidarity to our Puerto Rican sisters and brothers and family right now who's without power, to our sisters and brothers and family all over the world who are experiencing oppression, from Uyghur Muslims in China to Rohingya Muslims, to the people of Syria and the people of Yemen and the people of Somalia and Sudan and people of Central America. I mean, all over the world, our people are counting on us to help elevate their voices, elevate their pain and trauma, and help bring relief to them. And I hope that that is the role that we play here as part of this larger Pacifica network. So thank you all. I'm going to pass it back to my friend Lawrence, and thank you all for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to share the space with you.
Thank you, my sibling. I am your accomplice, not just your ally, but an accomplice. So with that, I just want to uplift Edwin Mercado, who is calling us, who is on the Zoom from San Juan, Borinquen, Puerto Rico. Welcome, Edwin. And with that, I'll pass it over to my sister Tage to introduce Milton Armani, for our speaker on Africa.
You're muted, sis.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Brother Lawrence. Thank you, Sister Linda. I do want to piggyback off of something you said. You said disinformation campaign. So in introducing our next speaker, I'm honored to introduce Milton Alamadi, author of The Hearts of Darkness, How White Writers Created the Racist Image of Africa. Here to speak on the imperialist military and economic operations on the African continent. Milton is also a programmer at WBAI and publishes Black Star News, a Pan-African news outlet. And he's also adjunct professor of African history at John Clay College at the City University of New York, and has also been a guest on Freedom Now. So thank you so much for all of your work, and we welcome you.
Thank you. Thank you, sister. First, I want to thank Linda Sassar for the presentation she made. And it's very tragic in terms of the support that the Palestinian cause gets from the African continent. It's non-existent. I remember back in the day, in the 70s and the 80s, when there was strong relationship, there was an embassy in almost every African country. But the country is now under the firm heel of Western finance, capital, and imperialism. And the last defender of the Palestinian cause really was the late Nelson Mandela. I don't know how many of you remember that town hall meeting when Mandela came to the US, to New York in 1990. And Ted Koppel kept trying to press him on his relationship with the Palestinians, with Yasser Arafat, with Gaddafi, and with Cuba. And kept pressing him. And at one point, and it's a remarkable interview, it's on YouTube, I strongly recommend it. Mandela said, listen, in the very beginning of the program, I was asked about racist issues within the United States. And I said, I did not feel like qualified to comment on that. The US has a lot of capable people to address that issue. And that was it. You didn't come back to that issue. But you keep coming back again and again and again over my relationship with Yasser Arafat and the Palestinians. And he was trying to tell him basically that you have an agenda. And it struck Koppel that Mandela was actually right. Mandela said, if you had been paying close attention, you would realize that you actually have an agenda. And he was stunned into momentary silence. Mandela actually had to turn and look at him and said, I'm sorry if I paralyzed you. So I strongly recommend that interview. It's on YouTube. It's a classic. So if given a choice to participate in a demonstration or protest against Africa and its presence on the African continent, and a choice to demonstrate against the role of the World Bank and IMF on the African continent, I would easily go to a protest against the World Bank and the IMF. Yes, it's true. Africa, which is still based in Germany, has a lot of its footprints now on the African continent. There's some sort of military relationship between the US and at least 52 of the 54 African countries. There are small bases in more than 30 African countries. But with or without Africa, the US would still be able to impose its militarism on Africa anyway. And the best example was the destruction of Libya in 2011. With NATO, when the entire European and American command was involved in destroying Libya. And why was Libya destroyed? Allegedly, because Gaddafi was, quote unquote, killing his own people. So the West cared that much about Libyans that they decided to intervene militarily. Well, what's happening in Libya today? Libya is back in the 19th century with everybody killing everybody in Libya. So where is this Western humanitarianism today? That was, of course, nonsense, that rationale. Libya was destroyed because Gaddafi had operated outside the position that Libya is supposed to occupy in the global system, peripheral and dominated. What the West wanted to do was to take control of Libya's oil. Libya was unique in that it controlled its oil and was therefore able to retain much of the surplus. Unlike countries like Saudi Arabia, they may have billions and trillions of dollars, but a substantial portion of that goes to the international oil cartel, which is not the case in Libya. And the proof is clear. The oil companies were given waivers by the Treasury Department to start signing deals with the insurgents supported by the West, even before they took power. So they had already started to rearrange how the surplus from the oil was going to be distributed. Now, of course, Libya is total anarchy and nobody can benefit from that same oil that they were hoping to benefit. The other reason was, of course, Hillary Clinton wanted to put Libya on her resume once she was prepared for her presidential run. As soon as Gaddafi was killed, she rushed into Libya and posed and took a photograph, that awkward looking photograph. Anybody can Google it, with the so-called liberators. By the time she ran for the presidency, Libya was in total chaos. She said, I had nothing to do with that. All I did was give Obama advice. He's the one that made the decision to intervene. So don't blame Libya on me. That was the other reason. The third reason was that criminal Sarkozy, the French president, wanted to hide the fact that the Gaddafi family had given him substantial sum of money to run for the presidency in France. And this fool thought by murdering Gaddafi, this information will never come out. So that's why Libya was controlled, was destroyed. So here's the setup. When Western European countries colonized Africa, partitioned the continent in 1884 at the Berlin Conference, Africa became a plantation for the West. Each Western country got a slice of territory in Africa. They got cheap labor, and then they introduced taxation. And if you don't pay taxes, you go to prison. So the people displaced were compelled to work for the people who stole their land. They became wage laborers. The commodities they produced were shipped to Europe. Minerals that they were forced to work in the mines, shipped to Europe. Even children were forced to work in the mines, all shipped to Europe. And of course, overlaying all of this was white supremacist ideology, the apartheid system in every African country, where Africans were deemed inferior and Europeans superior. There were places designated, only Europeans can go here, Africans, you stay there. That was the global apartheid system set on the African continent. And Europe had just industrialized from 1760 to 1840. So Europe needed demand for these raw materials. And that is why the competition became very intense to have colonies in Africa. And they said, rather than fight amongst ourselves, let's sit down and formally partition the continent. And that's why they had the Berlin Conference. And then when colonialism became, the hypocrisy of colonialism became too intolerable, they decided that, okay, now we can negotiate what I call paper independence. They did not really decolonize, but they negotiated paper independence with most of the African countries. So now we have African presidents and prime ministers, but the big question was still, the continent still has abundant resources, most of the resources that we need for us in the industrialized West. How will we maintain control? And that question was answered in the Congo, with the United States working together with Belgium and Britain, murdered Patrice Lumumba and installed Mobutu Sese Seko, who of course ran the country down to the ground, a very minerally rich, endowed country. And they sustained him for 37 years, from 1960 to 1997. There were a few voices in the States, of course, fighting on behalf of Lumumba, and a prominent one, of course, was Malcolm X, who led protests in Harlem, led protests at the United Nations. Prominent writers like Maya Angelou joined in that. But an African country that wants to reposition itself from being a dominated and dependent country on the African continent. An African leader who supported Lumumba the most was Kwame Nkrumah, who was the first prime minister and then president of Ghana, which was the first African country to win its independence from Britain. And Nkrumah had made a few points. He said, if we don't unite into United States of Africa, they will continue invading us for our resources, or they would support other African leaders to undermine others, or they will use their financial clout to keep us dependent. And that's where the World Bank and the IMF came to play a very prominent role, and still does up to date on the African continent in terms of enforcing that dependency. So the West did not like what Nkrumah was saying, and that's why Nkrumah was overthrown in 1966. They exercised some of the muscles of the World Bank as well, because the World Bank had loaned Ghana millions of dollars to develop its hydroelectric energy program at the Volta Dam. And I was doing research recently, and I went on the website of the State Department. They have a section just for historical archives.
Brother Milton, I'm sorry, you got a minute.
Yes, I'm wrapping up.
Okay, sorry.
And I found memos instructing the World Bank from the US State Department and from the White House that the World Bank, even though the loans had already been approved, don't disperse the funds. So we can, essentially what Nixon said much later on when he was talking about Chile, let Ghana's economy scream, and then there would be hatred toward Nkrumah, and he would be overthrown. And that is exactly what happened in Ghana. And Mobutu, even though 1 year, an IMF official went to Congo and came back and said, this guy is so corrupt, don't lend him another dime. He was loaned $700 million which in today's terms is almost more than $2 billion, to give you a rationale. So I wrap up my point the way I began. The most dangerous enforcers today of imperialism and neocolonialism on the African continent are the World Bank and the IMF. And I have suggestions later on when we get to the Q&A, how sisters and brothers from Pacifica and elsewhere can join in the effort to liberate Africa from the clutches of the World Bank and the IMF. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Milton. Thank you so much. A very powerful presentation. So with that, we're going to go to brief station reports, then we're going to open up for Q&A. I'm going to go to the person from WBAI who's going to do the report. I have listed as Sheila, but she can't do it because, can I ask Stahamali to do the station report, please, for WBAI, 2 minutes.
Asante, brother. Yes, you can ask me to do that. And asante to you, Brother Milton and Sister Sasor. Great presentations. We could always hear more. At WBAI, we have a very unique situations. Well, not unique, similar to what's going on across the network. We have constant fundraising on our shows, lots of issues around preemption of shows in order to do fundraising based mainly on having premiums available. It's a difficulty for us. We also have a problem with our LSP, who is, they aren't really holding up to the requirements of that they agree to when they become LSP members, one of which is fundraising for the organization and the programming on BAI. We have consistent problems with people being preempted or programs being ended on the station. We do not have the same problem with Black and Latino programming being hit hard that we're seeing at some of the other stations. But our grid is often pushed around to the extent that we find it hard to keep our programming and keep our audiences because of that. I think BAI also has a unique situation of being in the highest cost requirements in the country. The city, the rent is high, very high. So we have a lot of high rent to pay for our location, the location of our station, as well as for our transmitter. So that often causes a problem for us in terms of raising money. We have little or no staff to do this work. So it's difficult for us to even have the human power to actually do the work that needs to be done in getting the word out about our station and getting people to support. I think I'll stop there. That's about 2 minutes, Lawrence. I don't really want to go over the time so others can have a chance to speak. Can't hear you, Lawrence.
I'm sorry. With that, I'm going to go to WPFW. Brother Lou Wolf, former local station board member for WPFW in Washington, D.C. Brother Lou?
Thank you, brother. And thank you, Linda. Thank you, Milton, for your very strong and revolutionary message today, very full of hard information. I represent Covert Action Magazine, now publishing in our 44th year. Our website is covertactionmagazine.com. About WPFW, we are now facing, as I speak today, a coup d'etat within the station, which is aimed at our station manager, Jerry Paris, and it's aimed at our financial manager, financial officer, Nick Arena, specifically. In fact, Nick Arena resigned this week. He's been without pay, without any single compensation. He has now resigned because of the pressures being brought on him by some members of the LSB, two in particular, one of whom has a lot of money and uses her money to wage war against several members, and particularly Nick and Jerry. So I would simply say that our finances are better, I think, than all four of the other stations. And yet we are facing deep financial problems. And I say the problem relates to the fact of the literally useless model that we have of raising money. That is on-air fundraising from our members. I mean, it worked for years, but our members and listeners and supporters cannot be asked to contribute every 4 times a year, and sometimes it goes to 5 and 6 times a year. It's called exploitation on the air. So our motto is making the world better, one website at a time. I'm sorry, one day at a time. And so we have to live up to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Lou. With that, I'm gonna go to our sister station at KPFT that just got on the air this morning after not having a studio and being studioless. With that, I'm gonna go to Nancy Sabara Naratomi from KPFT. Nancy, you have the floor.
Okay. Yeah, this is Nancy Sabara Naratomi from KPFT in Houston. My report is what? Well, a lot of upheaval, political upheaval at our station. The LSP is supposed to suggest a pool of candidates for the GM, but the PNB and the ED decided to give us select for us without our input. So we have a new GM, IGM, and he was formerly a staff LSP, but he's not giving up his staff vote. So he's voting as a staff and keeping his GM, which is prohibited in the bylaws for the GM to vote. But he said he's not a GM, he's an IGM, because in the bylaws, there's no word IGM. So he's saying, I can vote as a IGM. It's just technical, word game there. What else? He's completely changed the whole grid. He said, we don't know how, but already shows have been told individually that they're going to be at different times. And I'm getting calls from a lot of programmers. Again, we're having the same thing that happened last year. Where 20 shows were mostly public affairs, mostly of programmers of color, were moved to the HD2 channel. And very few people have HD radios, and none of the prisoners in the prison system have the HD radios. They're not allowed to buy one. So we don't know what's going to happen. And we have gone back on the air as of about noontime Central today. And there are runner-ups, 3 runner-ups to the LSP have not been able to get on the LSP because the majority of our KPFT LSP is New Day. New Day is the one who wants to get rid of all the LSPs in the last referendum. If you voted, so this is ongoing.
Good, yeah.
I'm so sorry. Okay, that's enough. Thank you.
You need to wrap up.
Thank you. Please allow me to moderate. With that, I'm gonna go to our affiliate representative from WMNF in Tampa, Florida, Alvaro Montalegre. Alvaro, you have the floor.
Thank you. I think I see from everybody's comments, and not just now, that there's it seems a concerted and coordinated attack on community radio at a national level. This is a letter that we're sending our general manager with whom we met for the first time in over a year and almost a half. And I attribute that in great part to this group here raising the issues at a wider level. Since before we were so small or I'm saying, you know, they would not listen to us. Good afternoon, Randy. This is the letter that we write to her after the meeting that we just had. Thank you for meeting with us last week. This was the first gesture and acknowledgement by WMNF of our concerns. These were some of the takeaways that were mentioned among us. The meeting was cordial and productive and allowed us to voice concerns while getting to know your, Randy Zimmerman's views. We advocated for the return of the day and evening news. Randy said she was committed to that. The return and commitment to the Native American program. Alvin explained, and Alvin was the host of the show, explained that at the height of the national interest over the deaths of indigenous children at religious institutions, WMNF had pulled the plug on the show. Randy and Julie Sheed, who's the volunteer coordinator, showed interest and implied that the show would come back pending actions by Alvin. These were not specified. What actions were not specified? Commitment to diverse Latin American programs consistent with demographics, 25% of the Tampa population. No commitment was made. Randy explained that the Latino music program had been placed on Wednesday evening for maximum effect purposes. Nothing was said of the fact that there is no Latino host present in the daytime, primetime programming, and no Latino talk shows. Randy said that Latino shows and the gospel program on Sundays had very low listener numbers, implying that they were not carrying their own weight, that the station were doing them and the community a favor because of kindness and commitment to diversity. The fact is, that is not true. The shows are very popular, and money-wise, the shows have always stood their ground in relationship to other shows in the time slot. Also, Randy has no way of gauging the audience numbers, and neither did Rick when he attacked those programs a year and a half ago, nor Randy Wynn, a male guy, when he did the same 10 years ago. Then they go by streaming numbers, Google Analytics, and calls into the studio. Latino shows do as well as or better than most shows in the same time slot. Something we need to question is why are most WMNF events whites only in attendance.
Thank you, Alvaro.
WMNF has never had an effective method of evaluating listenership, and it is even worse now because the station does not subscribe to the service by the only audience measuring company that does that work, Nielsen Arbitrum. As mediocre as it is, there is no alternative to it. Streaming numbers, Google Analytics, only count the number of people who tune in via computers and telephones, not the people who listen through the radio, who are the greatest number in our audience, and the medium through which all of the people who do not have digital access also listen to the airwaves. Clarification of WMNF.
Sum it up, please.
Okay. Randy Filmi stated that we are not going to go strictly AAA music. The question is the station implementing the 2014 idea of growing audience but eradicating diversity, or keeping with the original mission of station funded by listeners, diversity, and social justice? Randy Zimmerman said they are following the long-term plan as stated on the website. We cannot find this review on the website. I have more, but I'll stop right there. Thank you.
Thank you, Alvaro. With that, we're going to go to our sister station, KPFA in Berkeley. Elizabeth Malos, Lisa, also known as Lisa. Lisa, you have no more than 3 minutes, please.
Okay, I'll try to keep to that. Hello, thank you for all of you who have spoken before, and I just to keep it to 3 minutes, I'll be as brief as I can. I'm KPFA member of the LSB. I ran on the Rescue Pacifica slate. There are 7 of us on the 24-member board. And so we are definitely at a minority. So we have been dealing with a lot of issues at the KPFA level. First of all, let me state that KPFA does not have its own finance committee, does not have a programming committee. And I also want to state that the KPFA board has been behaving like a rogue board. They have been not acknowledging PNB motions. They have not allowed PNB directors to attend executive sessions or just to listen in. During the course of my being member of this LSB, we've attempted to get a resolution passed at the KPFA to support Frank Sterling, a journalist at KPFA, a fellow LSB member who had a pending legal case. He's a journalist who covers police brutality. The PNB did pass a motion in support of him, but KPFA did not. In fact, the Quincy McCoy, the previous general manager, stated in public meeting that no, KPFA is not a political party. That was his response in terms of us asking for KPFA to provide that support. In fact, KPFA does not really support many of its actual journalists, like Ann Garrison, who recently went on her own money to Ethiopia to cover the situation there. And she's an award-winning journalist, and she's not been even covered. There's other programs that are done at Pacifica level, like COVID, Race, and Democracy, that are not being covered at KPFA. That they're also, KPFA LSB also has violated its own rules in terms of the single transferable vote when they reluctantly elected a community advisory board, which was a requirement in order for Pacifica to be able to receive CPB funding. They only voted in 4 of their members using the yes/no vote instead of the single transferable vote, basically leaving out the other members who were nominated. There is a working cab, which is not the one that KPFA LSB is recognizing. But the main thing I wanted to talk about is the FCC petition that one of the members of the LSB, Sherry Gendelman, filed against WBAI. During the time that I've been a member of the LSB, I've heard bashing, Pacifica bashing, I've heard WBAI bashing on the part of this KPFA LSB, continuous bashing. And this is another attempt to close down WBAI. The PNB, KPFA, as a member of the audit committee, also we found out through this open meeting with George from NITA, which is the accounting firm, that KPFA had failed to hand in the financial documents, and it delayed the handing in the documents for 7 months. Whether or not this was deliberate or not, that has not been ascertained. However, we should consider the fact that when Pacifica is late more than 120 days in being able to finish its audit after the fiscal year, Pacifica could have fallen into a default situation with the loans. So those are issues that really needed to be addressed. And as the audit committee member, we tried to pass a resolution to get the finance committee to look into those delays, which was stopped. We were stopped in doing so. And in fact, I have been now, there's this attempt of purging me as well as any future LSB members, any members who are there presently. They're making accusations against me as having attacked KPFA general manager, when what he said was actually in an open meeting. They're using against me, and when I spoke at the Parkland Elementary School in Oakland, which KPFA at that time was not covering any of that issue, which was fighting closure of its school and allying with the longshoremen, a very historical, important alliance that was created, that were fighting the same fight. They were fighting the same privatizers. They were fighting basically John Fisher, who happens to be a multimillionaire from the Gap fortune, who's trying to privatize the ports with a subsidized A's stadium, and also to build a waterfront. So all those issues we had to fight in order for KPFA to actually even air or bring that on board. We were the ones that were exposing them. And now they're using something I said in a public meeting, and which also said in a public meeting against me, to try to submit me to a trial on October 29th. So I hope if people want to tune in, please feel free to do so. And I guess that's my time. I wanted to say many things. I'm also Chilean American, and the importance of this last vote that happened where we lost this new constitution, we need to look at how the media, mainstream media, right-wing media, and even so-called progressive media was used to a certain extent, which created doubts among people regarding this new constitution and the nationalization of water, because Chile right now has privatized water. Thank you so much. And so we need this space more than anything. I agree with Sister Linda, that this space is of utmost importance, that we keep it independent and we keep it listener supported. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you very much for your words. And we stand by you. With that, we're going to go to Q&A. And then after Q&A, we're going to go to a cultural break. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, briefly for KPFK.
Oh, yeah, KPFK.
Sure.
My own station. I forgot.
Your
Sorry.
own station, that's right. You know, KPFK, our membership and our listener support spiked when we were able to democratize Pacifica. And we brought in a general manager who restored some of the banned and fired programmers of color, especially Freedom Now, Didan Kamathi and Sister Tej, who was one of our co-hosts today, and American Indian Airwaves, and a lot of other shows that had been taken off the air when they tried to kind of whitewash our programming. And our membership continued to build right up until about 2008. And at that point, we were able to do you know, fund drives where we'd be on the air for 10 days to 2 weeks and raise $1 million. And the station was operating with a budget of about $3 million. And then, unfortunately, they made some unwise decisions, including, you know, spending to the limit of what we had in terms of paying programmers and increasing the staff. And we got caught in a vicious cycle of more and longer fund drives, preempting more and more shows, more syndicated canned programming nationally, and less local coverage. We gave up our local newscast. We gave up our bilingual morning Spanish language newscast. And as a result, our membership has declined and our listener support has declined. And the station now is in such a crisis that I was just asked, I've been the chair of the local station board here at KPFK. I was asked to be the interim general manager on an unpaid basis because the station is incapable of hiring a general manager at this point. And so I think the solution is the things we've been talking about. We have to make the station relevant again. We have to make the station engage with the community again. We need to do many of the things that are mandated and not carried out, such as having a regular dialogue with the listeners by the management, which I will be doing as the manager. Regular dialogue with the listeners, with the local station board. We need to be out in the community covering events and out in the community ourselves, putting on events as fundraisers, which has been starting to happen, particularly from the Spanish language programmers and, you know, both within the station and out in the community. And I think we need to restore some of the things that we used to do. We used to have a film club where people could see films together and get to know other members of Pacifica. And, you know, we used to have friends of KPFK in different communities all around Southern California. We have the strongest signal west of Mississippi. We're in Santa Barbara, in Los Angeles, Greater Los Angeles, Orange County, Inland Empire, down all the way down to San Diego. And we have to have groups in all those areas that are engaged with us and that we're engaged with them. And I think if we do that, we will turn the situation around. It is very severe fiscal constraints that we're operating under. And I think that the solution to it is very, very clear. And covering some of the things we're talking about in this town hall, I think is part of that. And engaging in a dialogue with the listeners about those issues and what people's solutions are to the problems that we're dealing with. The economic crisis of Pacifica is rooted in a much larger economic crisis in the society and on the planet. And political crisis, the threat of fascism, the threat of authoritarianism. And we have to be the platform that speaks to all of that and that speaks to what communities are doing to deal with all of that. The Palestinian struggle, the African struggle, you know, the indigenous struggle, the Asian Pacific Islanders struggle, and the struggle of all working people in this country and around the world. Have solutions to the problems that are being imposed and the draconian austerity that's being imposed upon us. And I think that if Pacifica addresses that and we begin to count more on our listeners and rely on them, then we'll succeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael Novak, and we will be behind you completely as our new volunteer IGM. Thank you for stepping up at KPFK. So I'll just do a brief P&B report. We are paying attention to everything that's going on in the network. And we are trying to do the best that we can. And we're emphasizing transparency and accountability in regards to being able to respond to the network. The way to deal with donor fatigue is to air relevant, new, fresh programming, because what's working right now, obviously, our listeners are tuning out. So we need to have them tune back in. We need to put the community back in community radio, and we need to put voices of anti-racist accomplices and anti-war accomplices into the mix. So with that, Sister Tage, I'm gonna go to Q&A, and then after that, I'm gonna go to Sister Serene for a cultural break. You okay with that, Sister Tage?
Sounds good. Right on.
Okay, folks. So there's a feature in the reactions in Zoom. If you hit reactions, you could raise your hand. If you're on the phone, just say stack and we will recognize you. So if you have any questions to the presentations that have been made by Linda Sansu and Milton Armani, please do so. There is hope for us, Andrew. So anybody have any questions before we go to Sister Serene from WBAI? Go ahead, Rachel. And then Eleanor. Anyone else? Go ahead. I'll keep the stack. Go ahead, Rachel.
Thank you, Lawrence. Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to ask Linda how, if you have any ideas about how we can get not only people at BAI, because that's where you're on the air, but just generally across the country, to get Jewish so-called progressives and so-called liberals who were so-called anti-war to support Palestine and to really understand that no matter who the president is in the United States, that throughout history since I've been born, and I'm 62, there's always been this Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I'm Jewish, but I do not believe in the state of Israel, and I stand for Palestine. I'm a cultural Jewish person. That's how I was raised, and I still believe in it. So, because it's the one subject that I find personally that I cannot raise up with my friends. None of the people on this Zoom, they're not in that group, but I have other people who I'm friendly with who I cannot raise that issue. So I was just wondering if you had any workable, concrete ideas. That's all.
Thank you, Linda. If you want to respond to that, and we have a 90-second limit for questions or comments. Linda?
Thank you so much, Rachel, for that question. Listen, it's a struggle. It's a struggle that we have around how permeated the conversation is, especially amongst Jews who are progressive on, police reform and immigration, and they'll be at the border. And then there's this there's a line that gets drawn when it comes to Palestine. And that's one of the reasons why this network is important to me. It's important to have voices like mine and voices who are pro-Palestine on the air, because even those who listen to us, as you sometimes might hear, I have callers who call into my show who I have to walk through some things about. So it's not, we assume that everybody who listens to our stations, or maybe I'm just attracting a whole new group of people that are listening to my show, but I do get people who are asking me the courageous questions, asking me the tough questions. And we just got to make sure that, again, we're centering the voices of folks like Palestinians who can speak to those issues, because those folks don't even have Palestinians to engage with. So they're hearing whatever they're hearing within their own communities and are not giving this opportunity. And I just want to say, not specifically to this question, but overall, and I said this in the chat, I agree with the being outside and being in the community. I'd love to figure out how to host town halls in real life. People want to hear, people are exhausted from the pandemic. And so that means that people want to be outside with us. They want to be in space with us. So if we can get some prominent activists and organizers and academics who want to come to space with us, we invite people to come. And when they get there, we could make these person-to-person appeals for money. And it does wonders. We do that in the Muslim community. We've done that in many organizations I've been a part of. So I am committed to seeing if we could do that. and maybe do a series of kind of a tour or town halls around the country. And I'd be happy to help to reach out to people to be a part of that, because these conversations are the only way we're going to get to where we need to get to, Rachel.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you so much for responding to Rachel.
Excuse me. That
Yes.
question was for.
Okay, go ahead.
Not for me, but yeah.
Go ahead, Milton, please.
Because
please.
it also affects the way Africa used to be portrayed. I think we need to really take on the corporate media as well, the narrative, because they control the narrative and therefore the perception as well. So back in the past, when South Africa still had apartheid, the narrative was that, look at this beleaguered country surrounded by all these Black African countries. This is the citadel of democracy on the African continent. So people were able to be persuaded. So it influenced their perception and the biases, not realizing that this was the most militarized country in Africa with the most sophisticated armed forces, supported ironically by both the United States and Israel. So the corporate media narrative has also played a very significant role in really distorting the narrative.
Thank you, Brother Milton. Eleanor.
Lisa, Elizabeth Milas, if you could just repeat the date and time and the name of the meeting that you're going to be kangaroo courted at, I'll put the chat link into the chat so everybody can attend.
Okay, Rachel, you want to, Linda, Lisa, I'm sorry. You want to repeat what you said? Okay, Eleanor, so Lisa is apparently, I don't know where she's at. But I'm gonna go to Josie Tiwa Tenerio. Josie, you have a question or a comment? Josie? Okay. Stahamili. I finally got your name right after many years.
Yes, thank you. My question is for Milton. Milton, can you update us on some of what happened at the UN regarding Uganda this week?
You mean in terms of the protest?
Yes, brother.
Yes, we had a protest, and I participated in the protest outside the UN. You know, there's a section where it's basically penned off, and all the groups protesting.
How's everyone doing?
There.
Hold on, Josie. Hold on. I'm sorry. Go ahead. You be next.
Yeah. So the protest was. It's always I consider it good when the people that you're protesting against, Ugandan officials saying, "Why are you participating and spoiling the good name of Uganda to the international community?" Of course, our response is always that the dictatorship and its U.S. An excellent job doing that, so we don't need to do that. But I'm glad you asked that. Power.
Milton, you might want to take off your video because your bandwidth is coming in weak.
In front of the World Bank and IMF. Some of them that we've been advocating. Oh, there you go. Yeah, so I know they're now asking us protesting, and that they'll meet with us on a regular basis. But obviously, that's not what we want in African countries. So that's the power approach. We also go to the UN and participate to build from Uganda to Tanzania, oil that will start being pumped in about 3-4 years, and is being financed by Total or France. And this protest has been successful to the extent that last week the European Parliament issued a statement asking Total to put this project on a moratorium, number one, use this period to explore other alternative energy sources or other alternative routes for this projected pipeline. So I'm a very big fan of social media protests as well as physical in-person protests whenever possible.
Thank you, Brother Milton, and thank you for the question, Sahamili. Josie, you have the floor. We have about 3 minutes left before we go to our cultural break.
Thank you. I apologize. I'm going to take 1 minute. Just want to make sure, and I want to thank all of you for sharing all the great information that is being shared here on this radio show. I wish we could definitely spread this more, throughout other potential radio shows. But also, let's not forget how our women go missing, and specifically in Africa and other marginalized communities and reservations. We want to make sure that we collaborate with other ethnicities, with other brothers and sisters out there, because the numbers keep rising and we are never mentioned throughout anywhere in social media. So let's not forget how we can all work together and collaboratively and make sure that our voices are heard throughout everywhere. So with that being said, my prayers to all of you, and let me know how I can support you all. Just know that Orange County is going to be hosting Indigenous Day, and we will be speaking about our sisters that have gone missing in Mexico and also throughout other places, specifically in Puerto Rico and in Africa. So with that being said, my love to all of you guys, and keep standing strong. I love all your political awareness and everything that you guys have to bring to the table. That's how it works. All united as one. Squally. Thank you. Thank you, Brother Lawrence.
Hello. With that, we're going to take 2 more hands. I see Sister Betty has joined us with Brother Ralph. Brother Andrew, you have the floor.
Yes, is that Andrew Weiss?
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Brother Lawrence. This is Andrew Weiss, listener member, longtime KPFK Los Angeles. This is an open announcement, if that's okay. I am the longtime founder and director of the Pacifica Listener Forum. For the past 1.5 years, we've been coordinating online open discussions for all the Pacifica community. I have now expanded, or we have expanded, to Friends of Pacifica Radio. We will also engage with outreach and promotion of all Pacifica stations in all communities, as well as fundraising for all of Pacifica, if anyone, as well as facilitating communication and education amongst the listeners, staff, boards, and management. If anyone would like to be involved, please email us at pacificalistenerforum@gmail.com. Once again, pacificalistenerforum@gmail.com. We will put you on our contact list, and I will put that in the chat. Thank you all. Peace.
Thank you, Brother Andrew. Sister Betty.
Thank you. And Uhuru to everybody on the call. I just want to give a statement from Ralph. The information that we are receiving now must be given a toehold in the wider media, and it can be done only basically through community radio. That's just his little, caveat to this meeting, and to thank everybody for what they're doing in this struggle. And I wanted to I don't know if everybody's aware that the amount of missing women and girls of African-American descent is horrendous also in this country, along with that of Indigenous women. And if you put that in the context of what's happening to women all over the world, this is extremely concerning. The statistics on Black and brown girls, especially in this country, is absolutely horrendous. It's like the equivalent of 1/3 of our missing children are, and they're never found because, of course, the police say, well, they ran away from home. But my issue is, even if they did, they're children and we should be taking care of them. So I want to commend the last Fightback, and this is my last comment. I apologize for sounding scattered. There were so many fantastic recommendations, but one of them dealt with trying to involve the next generation. And when Pacifica talks, people listen. The point is how to connect with that generation so that they can listen. And I felt there were 1 or 2 people on the last Fightback program that had tremendous new ideas for connecting with the next generation. Thank you guys. Don't give up the fight. And thanks for letting me speak, Lawrence.
Thank you, Sister Betty, and my hugs to Brother Ralph. Sister Ali.
Okay, thank you. I have a question for Milton, and I wanted to say something to Josie because she mentioned Mexico. I just want to let her know that this week they found the body of a lawyer not in Mexico, but in Ecuador. She was missing for 11 days, and they just found her body, and her husband is a policeman, and there is nowhere to be found. And they believe she was killed in the prison, in one of the prisons in Ecuador. I just wanted to give it that update. And to Milton Alamari, can you just give it an update of what is happening in Congo? Because I know that they're trying to get the UN out of Congo, and people, they have come out on the street, but they're also similar to in Haiti, how they tried to get the UN out of Haiti and they weren't able to. And then, as all of us know, how they have all these NGOs there and NGOs, I'm sorry, in Haiti, and they haven't been able to get rid of all of them. So can you, because I just was thinking about Haiti when I saw that protest in Congo trying to get the UN out. Thank you.
Right, okay, so thank you for that question. Congo is unfortunately cursed by its resources. It's a World Bank estimate a couple of years ago said it has mineral resources, and this is what's known so far, valued at over $30 trillion with a T. So there's always been contestation over the Congo's resources. So what happened was that beginning around 1997 up to till recently, the United States and some other European countries and Canada was using Uganda and Rwanda and the armies of these two satellite or puppet states to use their armies to invade Eastern Congo and to plunder resources from there, and then create this narrative of so-called tribal wars, you know? Because whenever you mention the T word in the West, then nobody's interested in finding out the details, really, what's causing these conflicts. So they use that to plunder billions of dollars worth of resources. But then, of course, Congolese activists, and I would join them in many of these protests as well, were able to get part of the narrative out. So then they introduced the UN peacekeepers, and then the idea was to push Uganda's army and Rwanda's army out and have the UN peacekeepers be like a buffer zone in between these countries. But as you follow, you gave a good example of Haiti. The UN peacekeepers are notoriously corrupt, and some of the crimes that were committed in Haiti were being also replicated in the Congo. Sexual violence toward minors, you know, boys and girls, engaging in resource plunder themselves. So there's a lack of political will in terms of really to help Congo to stand up on its own and to maximize the benefits of its resources. They would rather tolerate the astronomical bloodshed and have the resources extracted illegally through Uganda and through Rwanda. Uganda and Rwanda export hundreds of millions of dollars worth of minerals that don't even exist in Uganda and Rwanda. So the fear is that if you take out the UN peacekeepers, then they will have open terrain like they had before the UN peacekeepers came onto the scene. But the Congolese are saying, we don't think the UN peacekeepers are being helpful at all. So that is the dilemma that exists right now. And it looks like the narrative is now trending more against the presence of the UN peacekeepers in Congo. So we'll have to just keep our eyes open and see what happens.
Thank you, Milton.
I hope that helps.
And thank you, Ali, for your question. I just want to highlight that my ancestors are Congolese, and our culture was enriched by our ancestors from Ekongo. So with that, I'm gonna go to Sister Serene for our cultural break. Sister Serene, are you ready? Serene? Okay.
She might be in her car. I can start. I'll run it.
Okay, go ahead. Okay, so let me I'm gonna move on to Puerto Rico, and then we're gonna go to Fanny Ortiz from Benzodemos Brigade and Alejandro of Cuba that is fighting to end the criminal blockade of Cuba. With that, I'm gonna go to Ana Lopez, professor at Hostos College in the Bronx, New York, and she could further introduce herself. Ana, you have 10 minutes. And
Okay.
I know you're pressed for time. That's why I'm taking you first.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Saludos. Revolutionary greetings to everyone in the West Coast, coming from the East Coast. I am a member also of El Frente Independentista Boricua, and we are in solidarity with the groups that are doing work with Cuba and Hands Off Cuba. We have a series of activities that is taking place next month, and we're part of the organizing team for that. So I do want to talk about the recent situation in Puerto Rico, where the Juan Ruiz Brigade, which is the brigade that goes on a yearly basis to Puerto Rico, has been visited by the FBI. 50 members have been harassed and visited by the FBI. There has not been any subpoenas handed down, but primarily as a way to harass anyone who is in solidarity with Cuba and providing Cuba with support. A lot of the groups provide medical supplies to Cuba and have done a lot of political work to support the ending of the embargo. So the Puerto Rican people have always utilized the political principle of non-collaboration. And this non-collaboration principle was established by our national hero and leader, Don Pedro Albizu Campos. And Don Pedro Albizu Campos established the principle of retraimiento, which meant that as colonized people, we have to resist and not collaborate with any governmental system that is in cahoots with the colonial system. So you resist colonial elections, you do not participate in any of their entities, you do not recognize their authority in any manner possible. So non-collaboration has become the political principle that has been utilized in Puerto Rico against any grand jury and FBI repression. In the 1930s, Juan Antonio Correger was first subpoenaed by the FBI to submit the list of members of the Nationalist Party. And because he refused to collaborate and he exercised the political principle of retraimiento, he was incarcerated and sent to prison in the United States. So with the commencement of the application of that political principle, everyone else who has been subpoenaed or has been harassed by the FBI or any colonial authority, non-collaboration is the rule. So I just wanted to add that. That's so important, because that's how you resist an entity that tries to appear legal, but is really illegal. It has no legal, no moral authority over our movements. We have to resist in every way possible, and non-collaboration is the way to go. And basically, it encompasses the right to remain silent. You do not have to speak, open the door to any federal authorities who are illegally investigating your right to resist and fight back. So I wanted to add that. And I want to do it in the spirit of Lares. Yesterday was the 23rd of September, and we were commemorating 157 years of El Grito de Lares, the Cry of Lares, which took place in Puerto Rico in September 23rd of 1868. And it was the year that the Puerto Rican people politically declared themselves a nation, fought back, an armed resurrection, and to get rid of Spanish rule in Puerto Rico. And since then, the colonial powers, which now are the United States, we've been under US colonial rule for 124 years, we're fighting still against the colonialization of Puerto Rico under the US flag. And in present days, we have a terrible situation in Puerto Rico. We're calling out to all freedom-loving people in the United States to support the Puerto Rican people to get rid of corrupt government that we're under. We just suffered a hurricane, and this is day 8. Puerto Rican people have no electricity, there's no water. The devastation continues because of the faulty electrical grid that we have in Puerto Rico, and they've been milking the Puerto Rican people. They're charging, they've had already 8 different increases, and still the electrical grid is a farce. It's under a private company that has not done any work on improving our electrical system in Puerto Rico, but continues to charge large numbers and take monies from public sources in Puerto Rico. So we say no to Luma. Let's force a movement to get rid of our corrupt colonial government, and we want the solidarity of people all around the United States and in the world to join with the Puerto Rican people to fight for our independence. And we have a right to be free. And basically that is my message. Thank you so much for affording me this opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you, comrade, sister, sibling, Ana Lopez, for taking time to step up for Dr. Deborah Santana, who is on the island and who was scheduled to speak here today, but as a result of Luma and the insurrection on our energy grid for many years now, she was unable to make it. Ana Lopez, thank you so much. Enjoy your grandson. Y que viva Puerto Rico libre.
Que viva Puerto Rico and power to the people. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. So with that, it gives me great honor to introduce our next speaker, who is Fanny Ortiz from the Venceremos Brigade from Los Angeles Hands Off Cuba to End the Blockade. And I know there are members from LA Hands Off Cuba, which we are organizing a protest for October the 29th. And how appropriate it is to introduce a speaker on Cuba, La otra ala del pájaro, the other wing of the bird, which Puerto Rico and Cuba has always stood by Puerto Rico, and we stand by Cuba and its revolution and its diplomacy throughout the globe. Fanny Ortiz, you have the floor. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Fanny Ortiz. My gender pronouns are she, her, ella. I was born and raised in occupied Tongabo land, which is Boyle Heights. But currently I'm in Ohlone land, and I just wanted to recognize that. I am a brigadista with the Venceremos Brigade. And just to share a little bit about the Venceremos Brigade, it is an anti-imperialist project of political education and voluntary labor in solidarity with Cuba. We are intergenerational, multiracial, multicultural, gender expansive, and inclusive collective of volunteers committed to changing U.S. policy towards Cuba and strengthening the relationships between the Cuban Revolution and movements for the justice in the U.S. So we have 5 unity points. The first one is that we believe in Cuba's right to self-determination. And 2, we believe in the constitutional right of US citizens to travel, move, and freely associate with Cuba. 3, we also believe in internationalist struggle and solidarity. 4, we believe in building equity, justice in the struggle against capitalism, racism, patriarchy, and colonialism. We also believe that people are not disposable. And so our demands are to end the US blockade of Cuba, of all US imposed travel restrictions, and all regime change programs, to end the illegal US military occupation of Guantanamo Bay, and to strengthen movements for justice in the US through exchange and collaboration with Cuba. And as we all know, the US embargo and sanctions have been causing economic crisis for the last 60 years. The financial embargo, or commonly referred as the blockade against Cuba, has explicitly, as stated by the Secret State Department memorandum in 1960, is to bring out hunger, desperation, and overthrow of government. The United Nations.
Brian, learn. Go ahead, Rachel. Sorry, but Fanny.
That's
I'm thinking of Rachel.
Okay. So we know that the United Nations has called out the embargo by noting that restrictions imposed are there to help deprive Cuba of vital access to medicines, new scientific and medical technology, food, chemical water treatment, and electricity. And under the Trump administration, 243 additional sanctions and measures were implemented against Cuba, including in the context of the pandemic. These measures include trade control, suspension of aid and technical assistance, freezing of the target's financial assets, and blacklisting of foreign companies involved in trade with Cuba. And the inevitable and intended result has been shortages of food, fuel, basic goods, and medical supplies. And so as we're here in this space trying to advocate for the voices of the most vulnerable and impacted by the imperialist project, I think it's important for us to share of all the different struggles throughout the world. And this is why I'm here to talk about Cuba. We understand that while Washington has maintained a series of measures against Cuba, beginning with the trade embargo in 1960, and continue to try their measures over the decades, the US blockade against Cuba is the largest, the most comprehensive economic war, and not only in economic terms, but against any country. Its main purpose is to overthrow the Cuban Revolution. And through the decades of implementation, the blockade has caused estimated financial damages to Cuba of over $822 million. While there was some loosening of restrictions under the the Trump administration reinstated and further tightened the measures in Washington against the population of Cuba. So we are calling for the end of these restrictions, which are aimed at making life hard for the population of the island because of the Cuban people insist on defending their sovereignty and deciding their destiny for themselves. Understanding that more than 200 new restrictions and sanctions were added in the recent years. As they include the right to travel to Cuba from the US. A limit of $1,000 per quarter was imposed on Cuban Americans sending aid to relatives, while remittances to non-family was cut off. And the Western Union shut down over 400 offices in Cuba where people had been able to receive money sent to them. They also eliminated the sending of remittances to Cuba from third countries. And Washington stepped up pressure on companies in other countries to cut off trade with Cuba under the threat of losing access to the US market. Air France canceled its agreement with Cuba, with Cubana de Aviación and Pertobras. Uruguay refused to offer service to the Cuban airline. Costco, a shipping company based in Asia, canceled all shipments to Cuba, affecting medical supplies that Cuba was awaiting for during the pandemic. Washington has targeted the oil sector with 34 Venezuelan vessels and as many as other foreign shippers sanctioned. Cuba pays more for food imports because it cannot buy from US suppliers, paying $350 to $600 more per metric tons for frozen chicken, for example. Cuban food manufacturers are forced to import 70% of raw materials, and items with just 10% of US components may not be sold to Cuba, cutting off access to needed medical technologies, including state-of-the-art hearing aids, supplies to treat the symptoms for Parkinson's disease, different types of cancer, as well as progesterone, using the assisted reproduction program to prevent premature births and miscarriages. Washington's actions prevented of a donation, including mechanical ventilators, diagnostic testing kits, face masks, and other medical supplies from the Chinese company Alibaba. The Swiss companies IMT Medical AG and Accutronic Medical Systems AG, recently acquired by a US company, refused to sell Cuba advanced technology ventilators for critical COVID patients. These are just a few other things to mention, to share with you guys about the impacts of the US blockade against Cuba. And it's been on for over 60 years, and it's incredible to believe that many Americans are not even conscious or aware of the sanctions that the US has been implemented against Cuba for the past 60 years. So it's important to keep spaces like this open so we can continue disseminating the information and making others conscious of the impacts, because, you know, it's easy to say that a socialist project is a failure, but we understand that it's not, because the first thing that the socialist project it's implementing is the sustainability of human life, something that we have to advocate day by day here in the belly of the beast. And that's just to talk about some of the things that are happening, but there's more to share. I don't want to take too much space, but I also do want to make a shout out that yes, there's also going to be a week of actions starting with Saturday, October 29. The main ones is going to be in New York, but it could be anywhere from any location. And it's a week of anti-blockade actions right before the UN vote. And we know that the UN vote takes place on November 2nd. And so we're asking anybody to support us in implementing an action or even joining in New York if possible. As a member of the LA Hands Off Committee, Hands Off Cuba, that's part of the work that I'm doing and actually implementing work along with the Venceremos Brigade. And I'll pass it on. Thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you, Fanny. Thank you for that chock full of information. And Mark Freeman, the consultant, the LA Hands Off Cuba Committee to End the Blockade is a group of high school, college students, youth that have been to Cuba and that have come back fired up. And so Mark put in the Zoom, Mark Freeman, who's the elder consultant, I'm gonna say, as I am. He has put a meeting that's happening on Monday in the chat. So if you're interested, please join us so we can organize the October 29th action that's going to happen. So with that, I just want to say something briefly about Rachel, and I'm going to pop it to Sister Tage. But I met Rachel years and years ago when she was with Global Exchange, and I was actually the second time that I went to Cuba. I went to Global Exchange as a licensed person to Cuba, and we went throughout the island. But Tage Graywall, my sister Tage, is going to introduce you, Rachel. So thank you for hanging in there with us, and thank you for being here. It's great to see you.
You too.
Sister Tage.
Thank you, Brother Lawrence. Thank you, Sister Fanny, and welcome, Sister Rachel. It's an honor to introduce you. Rachel's here to speak on the US-NATO efforts to wage a new Cold War and potentially a hot one against Russia and China. She's the founder of Cold War Truth Commission and the 2018 Green Party candidate for the California State Assembly. Rachel teaches environmental resource engineering and runs a small urban farm, Harbor Farm San Pedro, a longtime Latin American solidarity activist and volunteer organizer with Code Pink. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you. Thank you. And I have some slides. Could you give me, am I able to share the screen?
Yeah, Michael, can you please make Rachel co-host so she could
Thank you.
share?
Yeah. So first of all, just wonderful to hear all of you, my fellow speakers, and the questions and the reports from the radio stations, and all of the questions. Solidarity to our Chilean, yeah, Elizabeth. I want you to know that I have been a teacher for 17 years of Spanish, and every 9/11, I teach 9/11, 1973. So I've taught over 1,200 kids that, and I will continue. And I'm also on the kind of the board of the National Network Opposing Militarization of Youth. And so I'm working really hard to get the curriculum that I've been working on for a long time out there also. Children get it. And what's wonderful is they're a renewable resource. They keep coming, and they keep coming open and full of love and really seeking truth. So with that said, I'm going to put, okay. So with that said, if I may, can y'all see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So if I may, forgive me, I'm going to go a little bit off topic because, as I want to do, I am going to challenge the premise, first of all, that this is a new Cold War, and secondly, that it was ever cold. You could say that, the Cold War was actually the beginning of World War III, which could have been August 6, 1945, with the dropping of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. And so to even call it a Cold War, as we all do, is insulting to all of the people who have been murdered in so many ways by this very hot war around the world. I come at this also as an environmental engineer, and someone, and Lawrence, we met when I was coordinating the Eco-Cuba exchange, bringing American environmentalists down to Cuba to have an exchange of ideas. Fidel would have called it a battle of ideas, right?
La batalla de ideas. Yeah.
La batalla de ideas, right? And eso estamos, like that's to me what this is all about. So in order to, as Martin Luther King said, to reach the common ground, go to the higher ground. So to me, it's about, how do human beings organize ourselves? How do we, especially now with all that's happening ecologically, resource-based, everywhere on the planet, it's the best of times and the worst of times. This is just an amazing opportunity to reach out with truth and true solutions, which are not the model, neither economic or political in any way, that we have been shoving down the world's throat. We can say, especially since the end of World War II. So we would say it's a new Cold War. Well, you could ask Yugoslavia and Venezuela and Nicaragua and Cuba and so many other countries that aren't socialist but who have been gravely affected. Fanny just outlined tragically so much going on. I was just in Cuba in February also, and it was probably the toughest I've ever seen it. So it's tough because I have beloved people there, and my daughter's family and people. So I'm a child of the 80s. And so for me, my Cold War reference really ingrained in my soul is Ronald Reagan. And so our wars against Central America are my Vietnam. And so that has just really informed my whole questioning of the Cold War. How I came to question the Cold War was just seeing that it was a war against poor farmers. And we can see in our economic policies, both at home and abroad, that we are not promoting people who care for their land or help feed us or who protect the water. In Chile, it was just mentioned, water is privatized, which means up for grabs to the highest bidder, on and on. And so also part of this program today is, how can Pacifica help? Well, the mission of Pacifica, one of the pieces in terms of war, is to gather and disseminate information on the causes of conflict between any and all nations. One of the ways I came to the Cold War was this book, among many other things, but if you look it up, A Conspiracy So Immense, how did we go from FDR's new economic deal that reads like Bernie Sanders, and he was the president and would have implemented it had Henry Wallace been, named vice president, not Harry Truman. How is it possible that that was almost the law of the land, and then it comes now to Bernie Sanders, and this is apparently so revolutionary? How did this country become so right-wing? And it was by no accident. Again, we believe that the Cold War is really a Trojan horse for fascism. And so therefore, the Cold War has been used against the world and against us right here at home for 70, 75 years. I'm going to read just our beloved at Pacifica Stations, Blaise Bompaine's, his statement to the first Cold War Truth Commission that we held in 2017. He said that the Cold War, and he had, of course, the program on for 50 years, World Focus, which was, people say here in LA when he passed, that was like the really last heart of what KPFK was really about, the anti-war message. And remember, KPFK or Pacifica started in 1949, so it was definitely the purpose of it was to combat the the BS growing around the country with the Cold War. Remember Edward R. Murrow being saying that if you're not confused, you're not paying attention. So the flip-flop that was going on in this country at the end of the 40s. So this is what Blaise said about the entire Cold War. The Cold War was an attempt to continue the military-industrial windfall profits of World War II. The Cold War was followed by a long era of profit without useful production. Millions of innocent civilians were murdered simply for being called communists. The word communist could be simply translated as okay to kill, or you all remember, better dead than red. We're still at that today, and I'll show you a picture of what I mean. In the past 28 years, the word communist has been replaced by the word terrorist. As our nation conducts a war on terror primarily against civilians, the commercial media silence in the United States during our current devastation of Yemen, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, Somalia, Pakistan, together with the immediate threat of biocide by thermonuclear weapons, is outdoing the demonic Holocaust of the Third Reich. Silence is complicity. Blaise Bompaine, PhD. So again, kind of setting up the challenge to the current narrative against Russia and China with that whole questioning in general. The CIA doesn't really care about the blowback it causes. Here, Rumsfeld, Donald Rumsfeld, I think he was, someone put in the chat exactly what he was, maybe special diplomatic to Middle East at the time, but shaking hands with Saddam Hussein and, making bedfellows, of course, as an anti-Iranian, which is a whole Cold War mess that we caused in 1953 with the coup against Mossadegh. And so we can really look at every crisis around the world and really see a lot of post-World War II Cold War roots. And this is one of my favorite pieces by Francisco de Goya. The sleep, el sueño de la razón produce monstruos. The sleep of reason produces monsters. If we don't get right with our foreign policy, if we don't get honest, it's coming back to haunt us. And everyone's going to cry about the lack of democracy at home and what's going to happen. And these Democrats are, throwing up and crying their crocodile tears when they have been complicit around the world in this. Fidel, and just one of the things I want to say so I don't forget, one of my dreams is to actually do a podcast or a radio show, Habla Fidel. And it would be a podcast that has at once everything and nothing to do with Fidel Castro Ruz, but it would be Ruiz, but it would be using ideas of his and things that he's said to talk about the current events, because no nunca va a morir él. So we don't want to produce monsters, but we can't be hypocrites, because we all know that 9/11 was blowback for Iraq War #1 and us having put U.S. military bases on, sacred land of Saudi Arabians. And so here is a picture that I would love to see in the chat if any of you have seen this picture before. It's January 6th. And up there, and it's hard to see, unfortunately, the sign in my smaller picture says the real invisible enemy is communism. On January 6th of whenever last year, when that was all happening, I saw this sign go up and I could not believe it. This is their mantra. This is the sleep of reason produces monsters. These people up here believe that Joe Biden is a communist and that we must do everything we can. They don't care if Trump won or lost the election. It doesn't matter to them, because just like we've done internationally, like many of these military people have been trained to do, you kill people no matter what. Better dead than red. And so here at home, we've produced these monsters there where people don't care. And so anything resembling loan forgiveness for some students, maybe some Medicare, maybe Social Security, maybe on and on, any of that cannot even be had in this country because of 70 years of Red Scare and crushing of any of these ideas. So brings us to the end of the Cold War, supposedly, right? And our promise, as we know, to the breaking up Soviet Union, and this is even a couple years old, this graph, the breaking up of the Soviet Union, that we would not move, quote, even 1 inch towards the east. Well, as with NATO, well, as we all know, NATO has over doubled in size, with 5 countries on Russia's border having nuclear weapons. 5 NATO countries. And so, of course, we ask, and we have to ask, if we had Russian nuclear weapons in Canada or Mexico, what would we do? And it can go on and on. So in order, I guess my point is taking it back to the larger, even questioning Cold War #1, not just even questioning this particular war and how we talk about it and seeing it and see it is very, very important for people to understand. When I talk to students, sometimes I'll say, wow, Russia has 6 military bases around the world. And they're like, oh my God. And I say, and we have 800. And they're, oh, little perspective. And it's very, very important to understand that, of course, we could have had a new security arrangement after the quote unquote fall of the Soviet Union, or the end of the Cold War, which never ended and never was cold. We could have had an entirely different security arrangement, but we couldn't, because, like Blaise Bonpane mentions, this is all about building the military economy. And so again, I kind of go full circle to, it's the system, stupid. If we have an economy that is only based on making money, then we're only going to have an economy that is based on something that currently makes us money. But I'd like to leave with a little bit of hope also, is that as an environmental engineer, and we've all know the word sustainable and unsustainable, this system of militarism around the world, this system of tearing up the islands all through, speaking of China and our Cold War, not so cold, against China, the circling of China now in the South Sea is taking up so many small islands and ruining the ecosystems of all of them in those South China Sea area, that the global pollution that this is causing and climate change ramifications, that the word unsustainable means that it can't last. So I truly believe, people ask me, how do you go on knowing what you know and teaching what you know and doing this? And one of the things I do, Lawrence, is I farm, and Cuba has helped me see another way, of doing, of treating the land. And I have to say also, I was in Nicaragua this summer, and they're doing amazing things with agriculture. I went on an agroecology trip, but they are now in a position to go and help Cuba back. So Cuba helped the world, as we know, for decades and decades. And I love to hear all the people who are now, and the countries who are reaching out in solidarity with Cuba, because they really need it, because of our crushing of them. So as I end here, and I guess we're going to open up for questions for everybody, but I just want to show 2 slides. I'm going to be putting these in the chat, but I wanted to kind of show them first. There's a piece I wrote on it's older, but it's kind of debunking the entire Cold War and why we started the Cold War Truth Commission. Also, here's a video by a woman. She is now deceased, but she was 98 and sort of the muse of the Cold War Truth Commission. She was a nurse in the late 40s and was told to sign a list, sign her name, saying that she was not a part of any of the progressive groups, anti-racist, anti-poverty, just to show how the Cold War at home has so gravely affected the left. And I'm continuing interviews. If any of you either particularly have been affected by the Cold War, or your parents or elders, we're trying to get these stories out of people who were affected, especially in those early days at home by the Cold War. And I want to give a shout out to our speaker on Africa. I think of Thomas Sankara and, everything we did to Africa, and the development models that we crushed. So one of the things I want to do in the continuing is to look around the world and sort of have a what if, what if Lumumba hadn't been killed? What if Allende hadn't been overthrown and murdered, and Arbenz and Sankara? What were their policies, and what kind of development could that have led today to those countries? Burkina Faso could have been, nothing like it is today. Unfortunately, the poorest country, I think, in the world. Our first Cold War Truth Commission, there are the links there. And then last piece, Ukraine on Fire, very important. Oliver Stone is just amazing. And if you haven't seen that movie or read his, here is the whole second Cold War Truth Commission, as well as that picture. I'd like to, from the January 6th on the steps. And then the last 2 are actions you can take right now to help peace in Ukraine. So again, I'm going to have these on, and let's have a different style of development, and let's turn munitions into music and change this thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you. And I'd like to thank all the speakers for their contributions today. And what we are asking for before we go into Q&A, we are asking you we're going to open the floor for discussion, seeking to focus on how Pacifica can do a better job at centering anti-war and anti-racist voices, and what we can do to make that happen. And then I will be giving contact information after the Q&A. I saw 2 hands up. Rachel, thank you so much. It's great to see you. As always, I forgot that it was the Eco Justice thing that you were doing that completely sold me on the idea of visiting what I consider to be, as a Puerto Rican, as a Boricua, Cuba is akin to, for me, and no offense intended, a Muslim going to Mecca. So thank you very much. With that, I saw a hand from Steve Seltzer. Please try to, if you have any questions for Fanny, I will ask Edwin Mercado to answer questions about Puerto Rico because he is in Puerto Rico, and any questions for Rachel and her presentation. So with that, I saw Steve Sosa's hand up. Then I'm gonna go to Michael and then Brother Milton. Steve?
Yeah, well, I think the question of imperialism and the war machine is very important. And Pacifica was founded actually by somebody who was against war, Lou Hill. And unfortunately, what we're facing now in Pacifica is that the stations, some of the stations like KPFA and others, have been taken over by people who support war. They support the Ukraine war. They support war propagandists who want to spend more military. And I think we have to be clear that the Democratic Party is a capitalist, pro-imperialist party. It's always supported war. And unfortunately, the AFL-CIO, the national trade unions, are also part of this apparatus. When we talk about Chile, the AFL-CIO was involved with the CIA in overthrowing the government of Chile. The AFL-CIO was involved in trying to overthrow the government of Venezuela. So, and the AFL-CIO supports the Asian pivot and the militarization of Asia. But the decline of US imperialism now means that it becomes more and more adventurous and threatens the whole world with destruction. So I think the anti-war movement has to be built on December 2nd. There's going to be an International Day of Action Against War called by Italian trade unions, COBUS. But Pacifica, we have to fight in Pacifica for it to be a leading force of activists, of people opposed to war in the United States and worldwide. And that is a battle because of the fact that I think corporatists and people who really go along with the Democratic Party are in charge of Pacifica. So that's a political problem. And we have to, I think, educate, work with the communities who are being affected by war. And every community in the United States, many communities, not every, but many communities have come to this country as a result of war. War in the Philippines, wars in Mexico, Guatemala, Chile. Many of the people in this country have come as a result of US war. So we have to work with these communities and build a movement. I mean, I think one of the problems is in Pacifica, again, the question of fascism, the rise of fascism, which is a result of the decline of capitalism, US capitalism, has to be addressed by Pacifica. It's not being addressed. We should have a national day of programming on the rise of fascism, who's behind it, how to organize against it. And I think one positive thing is that the growth of the labor movement, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of workers are joining unions, young workers. And our stations in Pacifica have to be a voice for these young workers and who are in struggle, because the working class has the power to end wars. General strikes can end wars. And I think we have to fight in our unions and in workers' movements to take political action by unions against war. And that would be something that Pacifica could help broadcast and publicize. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Steve. And I just want to say, this is the kind of content that will get rid of donor fatigue and bring our members back to our network. So this is the kind of content that's solely missing on our airways. And so I'd like to thank again, Rachel, Milton, Fanny, Ana Lopez, and oh my goodness. And who else?
Linda Sanso.
Oh, Linda Sanso. Oh my God. Oh goodness. Oh, okay. I see some hands up. I'm gonna go to Rachel. Do you want to respond to anything that Steve said, or Milton?
Well, just one thing. The point that to debunk all of this is to really. I think we're in two camps right now. Some people are grasping so hard and saying that this war, if we defeat this Russian aggression against Ukraine, then it's going to end. Then we'll have peace and we'll be able to keep our way of life. And I would like to argue that this period of militarism and Cold War and imperialist expansion of America, while it's given us some goodies, has actually made our life worse. That all of us in the world, including in the United States, would have been better off had this aggression not happened. So one more step towards that is what is it, $13.5 billion just for Ukraine recently. And they're saying that what is earmarked for Ukraine just our military buildup, just for Ukraine weapons and training, is almost the entire budget for the military of Russia, of the entire country. And yes, and a direct result, Trump is a direct result of our wars in Central America against the Cold War, because of the anti-immigrant hysteria he was able to foster.
Thank you, Rachel. So I'm gonna ask people to keep it to 90 seconds so we could get 2 more hands. Michael Novick, our new intern general manager at KPFK, formerly the chair of the KPFK local station board. Michael, you have the floor.
I really want to thank all the speakers. I think have been tremendously important presentations, and I did participate in the Cold War Truth Commission events that Rachel did, talking about some of the impact of that Cold War, post-World War II on my parents' union, later on the teachers' unions. And I think that it's important to recognize that in the context of the Cold War, the U.S. developed these enormous propaganda machines, Radio Free Europe, Voice of America, Radio Marti, and the people trained up in those propaganda bodies of the U.S. empire are now the people in charge of the FCC and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and over at NPR. And I think it's part of what makes it so critical that Pacifica has to maintain its independence and understand that it is a struggle for truth and for reality and for justice. And we have to keep ourselves a platform that can stand for those things, for anti-racism, for an anti-war stance in the world. So, in terms of what's at stake, I think that's a lot of what's going on, is that there's a desire to destroy Pacifica from people who can't control it and make it be another avenue of that kind of propaganda. I do want to suggest that we have an hour to go, and we really want to have some discussion and think about, in the course of this, actions we can take to make sure that Pacifica does play the role it should of principled opposition to war and imperialism. And, I think also in terms of what was laid out about NATO and the question of fascism that Steve raised, I think those are really, really critical. And on that question, I'll just point out to people that you find fascists on both sides of that struggle, the same way as what Rachel was talking about. There are U.S. fascists that are going to train in Ukraine, and there are U.S. fascists that actually back Putin and think that he's a savior of white Christian Christendom. So, I think that we have to strike an independent course and not be necessarily aligned with any of those things, and really understand that there's an internationalism that's an internationalism at the base, at the grassroots, an internationalism of all the oppressed and struggling people in the world that we need to be part of inside this country, because there are oppressed nations inside this country and colonized people inside this country as well as internationally, and that we have to stand together. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And I'm gonna ask everybody to keep it to 90 seconds. And if you have any questions for the panelists, Linda, Fanny, Rachel, Milton, and I will respond because Edwin Mercado is no longer with us. So I will respond to questions about Puerto Rico. Milton, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you for your observations, Rachel, generally. And then what you said about Sankara as well. I totally agree. Yeah, in fact, in my comments, I wanted to say that the Arbenz Mossadegh template is what was applied against Patrice Lumumba. Then, of course, afterwards, Nkrumah, and then later on, Sankara. You also mentioned the playing the red card, and I was very disappointed earlier this week when I was watching MSNBC, and I heard the spokesperson of the White House, Karine Jean-Pierre, say that she doesn't understand why the Republicans are abusing these immigrants and making things difficult for them, because after all, they're fleeing communism from Venezuela. And I found that very disappointing, particularly coming from her and her heritage and background, to use that same kind of Republican right-wing mantra. So I tweeted my objection to that, and I told her in strong terms that it's very disappointing hearing those kind of words come from her. And then I wanted to suggest, I also want to comment very quickly on Russia and Ukraine. I think what the talking heads, many of the talking heads don't see is that if there is a total defeat of Russia, we might end up like having the same scenario we had when Russia was totally defeated in Afghanistan, when the US played the same role supporting the Mujahideen. After all, these are the folks, some of them at least, that ended up being involved in 9/11. So nobody's thinking about the kind of groups that would be unleashed and empowered should Russia suffer a total defeat in Ukraine. So obviously, that's why we have to keep insisting that there should be a negotiated resolution to this conflict. And then finally, I wanted to suggest one of the things that Pacifica could be involved in doing is to participate in the protests that I've been participating against the World Bank and the IMF, perhaps co-sponsored by Pacifica, with involvement of some of our activists as well. I think that would be a potentially spectacular victory, particularly if the World Bank and IMF are forced to come out with strong statements acknowledging their shortcomings and their role in supporting tyrannies in African countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Milton. I'm gonna go to the panelists. Fanny, did you had your hand up? Was there something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that as a socialist, I feel like it's important for us to practice in building a leftist movement that's ready to implement revolutionary 21st century cadre formation because of the need of fighting this imperialist project that's inclusive of Black, Indigenous people of color. I think we need to work together in implementing revolutionary change. And this is part of that, doing the individual work, but also doing the collective work to make a long-lasting, impactful change. And so in reading the messages, that's why I'm saying that it's important for us to work together. Thanks, that's all.
Thank you, Fanny. And so we all suffer from symptoms of the loyal opposition and the duopoly. I have a question for Rachel after I'm on the stack. Elizabeth, you have your hand up? 90 seconds, please. Elizabeth? Okay, I'm gonna move on to Ali. I'll keep your hand up, Elizabeth. Ali?
Yeah, thank you, Lawrence. Yes, I just wanted to say thanks to Rachel for that presentation. I thought it was very good. And what I liked it was the beginning that you said you are a teacher and you teach the little one about not the 9/11 here, but the 9/11 in Chile. I just wanted to tell you that on S17, which we celebrate here for Occupy. I have a Chilean friend who is part of Occupy, and we were talking because she went to here in the Bronx to talk about 9/11 with her Chilean friend, which they came here during the 70s because of Pinochet. And we were just in the conversation about Chile. And I went to Chile about close to 5 years ago, about a little bit over 4. And I went to the Grimaldi village. And the sad thing was that I was talking to a young man the place, and he told, and I said, do you get a lot of visitors, a lot of people to come here? And that is the area, as you know, that a lot of people, they were tortured there. And he said, no, most of the Chilean people, they don't talk about it, and they don't want to talk about it. It's almost like silent. And only a lot of visitors, they just the foreigners that they come here. And I also wanted to say that my Chilean friend, her name is Francisca. Francisca was telling me, we were talking about the Constitution and what is happening in Chile. And because we were talking about the Grimaldi village, she said, I just wanted to tell you, even though I know that the media did play a lot of game, a lot of tricks on people voting down the Constitution. She said there is a lot of Chileans that they would love for the regime of Pinochet to come back. That's what she said. And that is a problem in Chile. So I just wanted to say that. I don't know if you have any knowledge and if you would like to add anything to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ali. Rachel?
I'd love to defer to Elizabeth on that, but
Okay.
it's a resource thing. Chile was used as such the model for the world of privatization, and
Right.
yeah, there's a really big source.
Right. Okay, Elizabeth, you have the floor.
Yeah. First of all, yes, unfortunately, the last election, the last presidential election, the person who ended up getting the highest votes was actually the neo-Nazi Felipe Cast. Okay, when I use the term neo-Nazi, I'm actually using it very specifically because his grandfather was part of the SS. Okay, so it's a family of Nazis. There's something on here. Hold on, somebody speaking in the background. Okay. The issue about the Constitution is kind of it goes back to the uprising that happened in 2019, which was initiated by high school students, which was fighting not only the hike in the fare, but rather it became a major uprising against the neoliberal model. And for many years, people have been fighting in Chile to change the constitution that was the Pinochet constitution, which historically has allowed the courts to veto any kind of new laws that could provide any contrast or any challenge to the privatization model that has happened there. There had been 40 years of education, of anti-communist education going on in Chile, 40 years where the privatization of education and the precarious labor standards have left workers very afraid of losing their jobs. There has been 40 years of a privatized pension, which has left people after 35 years of contributing to a privatized individual retirement, have become left with poverty income as a result of the privatized pension, something that, by the way, the military and the police do not have. They have the enjoyment of the public pension, which is from the revenue that comes from just 1/3 of the Codelco, the copper mining money that comes in. So they have the money to have a very lucrative public pension system, the military and the police. The privatization has been not only with regard to the copper and the lithium, but also the water, as we stated. Within this process of the uprising, one of the members of the Frente Amplio, the so-called progressive member of this new group that came out of the student movement of 2011, he was a congressperson. He met behind closed doors to stop this, accordingly, to make a so-called peace agreement and for a new constitution. But the agreement tied the hands of this new constitution. It was not a constituent assembly that was finally agreed upon. It was something that was very tightly held. Despite that, there was a very important vote that was opened up to people that were not necessarily members of political parties to create a convention, a constitutional convention of 155 people. Of those 155, the right wing, who thought they were going to be getting a good amount of votes, at least a third, they didn't get a third. They got 37 votes. They got 37 convention members. So what happened was, during the struggle, during the different year of trying to define this constitution, which, by the way, 80% of the population voted in favor of having this constitution be redacted or written by not members of Congress, not a mixed one, not combined with the members of Congress and the constituents, but rather just the members who were elected as the convention members. The Frente Amplio joined forces in several occasions within the voting system with the right wing, and with the Socialist Party did too, to vote against nationalization of the copper and the lithium. And I'm getting back here to just one thing, all right? why did it lose? Well, there was a massive, massive campaign done by media, by the right-wing media, and in fact, negligence, I would consider, in my opinion, negligence on the part of the Gabriel Boric government, who, by the way, became president thanks only to in the second round, thanks to more than 1.5 million people who ended up voting, who were mostly the people who had did not vote for him, but voted more against the fascist, and who he basically turned his back to. So, you know, the loss of this potential constitution, I voted for it. It wasn't perfect, but we needed to change it, and we needed mechanisms to be able to change it. And that's going to set us back quite a bit. But the struggle continues. And the 8 counties that actually approved the Constitution were the counties that adopted the similar models of organizing to the industrial belts, los cordones industriales that were going on during the Allende government, where the workers would organize the workers, and the similar kinds of organizing models. And that's the organizing model that we need to adopt at Pacifica. We need to organize, we need to go out and into the communities to try to get the money from the communities themselves, from people who, you know, even if it's dollar by dollar, but we need to go out there. And that's what I'm hoping that, you know, we can help organize and motivate our different groups that we work with. I'm a member of my union, UPTI.
Sum it up, Elizabeth.
Thank
Sorry.
you. Thank you.
Go ahead,
And
sum it up.
that's all I have to say. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to give a very, very quick rundown about what's been going on in Chile during these past few years.
Thank you.
Can,
There's so
can
much.
I have one comment just
Yes,
on the
please.
Constitution? Thank you. Is that, you know, to snatch victory out of the jaws of defeat on this, we can say, like, I've given extra credit to my students. I said, find an English copy of that Constitution. What a beauty. Please go back to your compatriotas and say, thank you for giving the world a model of something. It's so progressive, you know, that even the Cubans are like scratching their heads. I mean, so it's so progressive. We're at the first round here. So what if we look at that in English and start, I mean, here, and, you know, and just start, it's thrown around ideas. The ideas are all still out there.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm gonna go to James McFadden because he hasn't spoken. Then I'm gonna go to Andrew, colleague, Brother James McFadden, KPFA director.
Hi, I had a question for Milton, and I just finished reading a book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, and amazing book, you know, really extremely helpful for me to understand. And I was wondering if you had some ideas on additional reading about Africa that would be useful and helpful.
Yes, that book I use in all my classes at John Jay College. I have 4 copies of it, and I'll tell you I have 4 copies because there's been a couple of editions with different cover designs. And of course, the most latest one has an introduction by a foreword by Angela Davis, and that's why I have the multiple copies. It's a tremendous book. To be quite honest with you, the second other book I would think of would be I think it's called A World That Works, and it's by Mohammed Babu, Abdurrahman Mohammed Babu, who actually wrote the afternote of the first edition of this book, which was published by Tanzania Publishing House, Walter Rodney's book in 1972. Mohammed Babu was a Marxist Tanzanian who was considered to be a little too radical, even by Julius Nyerere, whom I admire tremendously, Tanzania's first president. But if there was a tragic episode, was Nyerere actually jailing Babu without trial for a couple of years. And it was tremendous internationalism that got Babu released. And Babu then spent most of his life living in exile in England, but also giving a lot of lectures here in the United States. He was a very good friend of Malcolm X, by the way. Malcolm met him when he traveled to Africa in 1964, and they became lifelong friends. So I recommend Babu's book as well. And I use that as well in my class. And then, of course, I recommend Thomas Sankara Speaks, which is a collection of very powerful essays by Thomas Sankara. So these are the ones that I can think of offhand. And then, of course, Samir Amin. But Samir Amin's book is not an easy read. And that's Accumulation on a World Scale, which, of course, was developed from his thesis. I think it's easier to first watch Samir Amin watch his lectures on YouTube. And after you watch a couple of his lectures, then you can dive into that book, which I think is, I don't remember how thick it is, but it's a very thick book and very thick language, very technical in parts, but it's well worth reading because it puts the entire history of global accumulation and plundering in perspective. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, that postscript by Babu is really great to read at the end. I mean, I'm going to put a little chunk of it in the chat because it I found it extremely great summary after having finished the book.
Thank you. That's one of the books that impacted my early development. That along with Mental Earth. Yeah, excellent book. And I know James will read it because he's a reader. Andrew, thank you, James, for the question, and thank you, Milton, for the response. Andrew, you have the floor.
Thank you, Lawrence. Elizabeth Miles, I agree fully. Pacifica needs to connect more with the communities that it serves. Question for Michael Novick. 2 questions, please. Congratulations on your new position as IGM at KPFK, my home station. I think we are most honored, and it will be a great thing for KPFK and Pacifica. 2 questions, please. First, who will become the new LSB chair now that you are stepping down as in that position, which I think you served very well? Second question, which you might anticipate. As background, I think one of the biggest problems at Pacifica is mismanagement, not following our policies and our bylaws and our mission. So with that said, will you reverse the current trend of general managers not respecting the communications motion passed by the PNB, our board of directors, close to 2 years ago running, of not having monthly reports to the listener, both for the general manager, for the LSB once every 2 months, as well as twice a year by the executive director and the chief financial officer? Will you implement those immediately? Thank you.
Michael.
Yes, thanks. So I will, I guess, take office, whatever you want to call it, on Monday. And one of the first things I will do is arrange to have a regularly scheduled management report to the listener and dialogue with the listener, take listener calls, and also to have the LSB report to the listener, permanently and regularly scheduled. It says at least every other month. I think we can probably do it every month. I don't see why not. And I will, in the management position, I'm hoping to be able to communicate, regularly and frequently with the ED and with the other station managers and try to see to it that's done across the foundation. As far as the local station board, I do think that obviously the board has to have an election to see who would be the chair. And But I will be there participating ex officio as the interim general manager, but I wouldn't have a vote in that case. So it would be up to the board to select somebody.
Thank you, Michael. Andrew, I hope that answers your question.
That was great. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Lawrence.
You're welcome. And I have a question for the panel, in particular, probably for both Rachel and Milton. Rachel, it has been publicized that López Obrador is trying to broker some kind of a peace arrangement between Russia and Ukraine. What do you think about that? I'd like to get a response from both of you. Thank you.
I'll just chime in quickly. I think it's great, and obviously it was condemned and ridiculed, and so it's obviously something that's a good idea. He called the Pope, and I just want to mention this. He said, I think it was India, the United Nations, which has been hated and defanged for ever since its inception because of the Cold War, and but he called the Pope, and just something really came out to me about this amazing Pope that Raul Castro several years ago said, if this Pope keeps doing what he's doing, I might become a Catholic again. So he's doing great stuff. And but he said when Uvalde happened, I don't know if you guys got he said he immediately went, this is not just a guns in Texas, killing of children again in America. This is a global violence problem and arms trade. And he said, we have got to stop the global arms trade. So I am pro anything that the Pope is going to be involved in terms of war and peace.
Thank you, Rachel. Milton, can you address that? And Fanny,
yes, of course.
Chime in.
Yes, I totally support it. I think obviously he needs to be joined by other world leaders that are seen as possibly being able to play a neutral role. It might not succeed because when capital is determined to pursue an agenda, regardless of the consequences. So for example, in Libya, the African Union proposed a solution, but that solution was completely ignored. And that solution was to have a ceasefire and have internationally supervised elections where Gaddafi would have no say in administering the election, in determining the outcome of the election, and in announcing the winner of the elections. But they didn't agree to that plan. So in the New York Times, it was buried in some back pages because the decision for regime change had been made. And there was also a possibility that in internationally supervised elections, Gaddafi actually might have won because he had put a lot of the surplus from the oil money back into Libya's economy. And I think there was a substantial number of Libyans who might have actually still voted for him in an internationally supervised election. That was ignored. So there's a possibility that this will also be ignored because, God forbid that it succeeds.
Thank you so much, Milton. I appreciate that response. I'm gonna go to Brother Lou Wolf. I want to ask the programmers that are part of the panel and the panelists to put any websites or any contact information, name of the shows into the chat, so our participants could have it. Brother Lou Wolf from WPFW, you have the floor.
Yes, I first want to say saludos to Michael Novick to become the new manager at KPFK. I just urge him, though he does not need me to say this, as one of our leaders of Pacifica Fightback, no question about it, be aware of the snakes in the grass still there at the station from New Day Pacifica. They're not giving up. They're about a long war, as the Pentagon calls it. Let me just say here, not to any particular person, that one of the gospels of this country is American exceptionalism. Barack Obama once said very proudly and openly, we are special. We are the greatest. We are special. And that's the doctrine that has been taught in high schools and even in grade schools and high schools, in churches and in the military, and still is, that the United States is the greatest nation on the face of the earth, and we are exceptional. So I think Pacifica has to stand up and say this. I've never heard it come from the mouth of Amy Goodman. She's a gatekeeper on 9/11, on Ukraine, and a whole lot more. She never utters this word. She never talks about imperialism, and nor will she. So thank you, Michael, for taking up this very valuable post. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe it was Michelle Obama that said, we are the ones that So I think that when she mentioned exceptionalism, and she was vilified for that. Fanny is, or any other of the panelists want, we have 18 minutes left, folks, so we still have good time. So, so I'll leave it. Sue, you are muted. Did you have something to say, Sue? Sue, if you have something to say.
What did you say that Michelle Obama? What did Michelle Obama say?
We are the ones that you've been waiting for. So anyway, that was some years ago. So I don't know if you want to, if any of the panelists want to address Lou's point. But we do have more time, so if you want to raise your hand and have a comment, please put the shows that that the programmers have, your org's contact information in the chat, so people could access it. I will be giving contact information for Pacifica Fightback and the email address where you could subscribe and get involved in this project, as Fanny would call it. Okay, so I have Elizabeth's hand. Anybody that hasn't spoken, hold on, Elizabeth. Anybody that hasn't spoken yet or provided a comment? Okay, you have the floor, Liz, Lisa.
No, the only reason I raised my hand is because I'd like to invite as many people as possible to give their ideas about how we can turn this around, the situation of Pacifica. And I say this with the utmost humility because here we're going to need as many voices, as many minds as possible to get together and reach out to our respective communities to seek the support that Pacifica needs at this time. Instead of seeking, what I'm doing is I'm asking people to join KPFA, but to contribute money to Pacifica, to join KPFA in order to vote in the elections and also to run as LSB members. We need to expand the community advisory boards or provide more community input to what's going on, and that the only way we can get Pacifica out of the situation that it's in is actually using this crisis as the opportunity of showing that listener-sponsored radio and public radio and community radio actually is the way to go, and the only ones that will actually listen to the communities that are hurting. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Great point. Very critical point. And there are links to all of the stations on the announcement and on our website, pacifica.org, pacificafightback.org. Sorry about that. That was a Freudian slip. Pacificafightback.org. You could donate. We are in an existential crisis right now on a national level, all 5 stations in the network. But I'm reminded of Frederick Douglass and his powerful words that without struggle, there's no progress. And every challenge creates an opportunity for us to overcome. And we are people that we have been overcoming throughout the years. So with that, I'm gonna go to Rachel. Hold on, Rachel. Milton, did you want to respond to anything?
Yeah. I just wanted to ask Elizabeth, I believe. I use in one of my classes at John Jay, the other 9/11, the BBC documentary on Chile. Is there any other that you would recommend? Many of my students were shocked, but then again, they're like between the ages of 18 to 22, and like 90% of them were not aware of the assassination of Allende and the whole U.S. role in it. But then again, many of them don't even remember or know who Nelson Mandela is. But if you have any other suggestions in terms of resources to use, particularly on Chile, I would appreciate if you could post that as well.
Go ahead, Elizabeth, please.
Well, one of the main classics is La Batalla de Chile from Patricio Guzmán. It's a 3-part series. They do have subtitles as well, but
okay.
It's very good one. But there's also been a lot of new up and coming directors that have shown things that are going on since then. I can definitely share that with you. Yeah, I will.
Thank you.
I will put it there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Rachel, I'm gonna go with Sheila because she hasn't spoken yet. Sheila Hamanaka from WBAI.
Hi, thank you, and thanks to everyone for sticking with us. I just posted again I don't know if it was posted before, I think, a link to the petition that we're circulating called
thank you, I forgot all about that.
Yeah, Protect Democracy and Fight Racism in Pacifica Radio. So if everyone could please check out our petition and sign it. It's full of information. It's kind of long for a petition, but if you take the time to read it, you'll see just a hint, a hint of some of the things that are going on at all of our stations. And Michael, I got to say, this is a great opportunity at KPFK, and I'm sure everyone here is willing to pitch in and help at a station where finally we can hopefully put into practice some of what we've been saying about giving communities the opportunity to both be on the air and join in with the fundraising for the station, which I think they will. And of course, to promote Spanish language programming. Thank you.
Thank you. And what's happening by Betty and Brother Ralph Pointer is in the chat. I encourage you to listen to that. That's on WBAI. I also encourage you to listen to Freedom Now, one of the outstanding programs from our beloved ancestor, Didan Kamati. And with that, I'm gonna call on Sister Tage, and I'm gonna go to you, Rachel. Hang in there with me, please. Work with me. But Sister Tage.
Thank you so much, Brother Lawrence. So just kind of a quick question regarding agenda timeline, because we're approaching October and generally next thing we'll know will be in December. And so this is an open question, but it also centers around Milton's topic that he mentioned earlier about the antagonist obviously is corporate media. So with our action steps, I'm kind of asking about what are we looking like as a team in the next 3 months, especially because Freedom Now or KPFK is going into fund drive next week. And if the other side is planning, whatever, so how are we looking at their model to understand how our changed model can move forward in terms of how that's going to look on a timeline, even just for like the next few months. We have an idea, or how do we build on that coming out of this meeting here?
Thank you. And we will take the last 10 minutes of this event and please put your ideas in the chat, because the chat will be captured and will be sent out in an email. But definitely we have to deconstruct the pariah, which is corporate media. Sally G from Ecologic, and then I'm gonna go to you, Rachel. Hang in there with me, please.
Yeah, I'm just thinking in terms of fundraising. One of my groups just set up a shop on Spreadshop where you can like sell swag with logos without a cost. And that may if that gets our image out there to the communities, that would, and raise a little bit of money at the same time. Check.
Thank you, Sally. Great idea. So I saw that you put it in the chat. Thank you so much for being here as well. Rachel, and then anyone else that has any ideas, put your hands up, because we'll take the remaining minutes to come up with an action plan. Serene, did you want to do the poem?
Actually, it's a song by the Calypsonian, the Mighty Sparrow, a tribute, if you will, to Queen Elizabeth, a farewell to Queen Elizabeth II. It goes back. I just put the information in the chat. I had sent the YouTube link to a bunch of y'all this morning. I don't know if there was problems playing it,
but I just put it in the chat. Folks can enjoy it for themselves afterwards. Please save it. Sparrow is a poet, social commentator extraordinaire. He is now, I think, about 88 or so. He's as sharp as ever, and really charts much of the colonial history of the Caribbean and happenings in the US and Europe as well. So please check it out. Thanks.
Thank you, Serene. And that's welcoming. Rachel, finally, and then James McFadden. And folks, we still have some time. So I do want to provide contact information in regards to Pacifica Fightback. Rachel.
Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you. I just want to say thank you to all the speakers this afternoon, and say congratulations to Michael. It seems that all of the stations that are on this call this afternoon are in the same situation as BAI is, and we all seem to be on the same page about this horror. I think that this has been going on, at least at BAI, for quite a few years. And I think, that the petition is really good. And I think that all of us have some really good ideas. But I do want to say that, I was a producer at BAI for 10 years, and then I was paid staff there as well. And now I'm a listener elected representative for the WBILSP. So what I want to say to, you don't have to be a member of the LSB and BAI or a listener to BAI to, contact. This has to be a Pacifica-wide, station-wide effort. So I suggest that if you're available to attend, the LSB meetings and other meetings on the computer, and call, the people who make wrong decisions or bad decisions, email them, bombard them. But I also think that, there's a short documentary that was made about a year ago. It's called The Takeover, and it's free. You can watch it online for free. It's 46 minutes long. And this is the story of how the Young Lords took over the Lincoln Hospital in 1974. And I strongly advise everybody on this call, even if you've already seen it, to see it again. Because I think that, we have a big job ahead of us to keep Pacifica not only on the air, but to make it back for the people, because that's what this is all about, and changing the world to make it better for everybody. And when the Young Lords took over the Lincoln Hospital, they spent a very long time doing the strategic plan to do this. And if we are going to take over, if you will, Pacifica and make it right again, as it was when I started listening to it when I was 15 and now I'm 62, we have got to formulate a strategic plan to do this. And we have to ask ourselves individually whether we're true revolutionaries or not. I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much. I will mute myself.
Thank you, Rachel. And I also like to encourage you to stream the Pacifica National Board meetings at kpftx.org, and also to write to the Pacifica National Board, which is pnb@pacifica.org, pnb@pacifica.org. Please let us know what you're sensing and what you think that we need to do. Would appreciate that. So with that, I'm gonna go to my colleague, James McFadden, KPFA director from Berkeley.
Yeah, I wanted to address.
And James, I'm waiting on my book. Just saying.
I wanted to address the idea of fundraising, and this is an idea I've brought up with some of the other directors, and but I really what I'd like to also hear from is people in the know that I feel a little bit out of the water in this case. So fish out of water. Someone in the chat also mentioned this, and that is doing some kind of a teaming fundraising. So we pick an issue, we focus on it, you focus on the national level, and the monies raised during those fund drives to be split with the groups that we're highlighting. And I don't know, but I think if I was somebody listening to a very compelling issue, you know, and I have a choice between going in and just donating to Pacifica just because they're highlighting that issue, or going to the group themselves and donating, I might want to go to the group rather than go to Pacifica for highlighting it. But having a split thing, you know, might be a way to draw in people, and especially if we can do it about some very, you know, issues that are really compelling and emotional. And right now it seems like issues around abortion and Roe v. Wade and the Supreme Court, you know, out of control by voiding that is an issue that really resonates with so many people, and, you know, and could be used not only to raise funds for Pacifica, but also could be used to raise awareness on the issue and to raise funds for those groups that are really trying to you know, circumvent this loss of rights by women. And anyway, I think that kind of teaming effort might be a better model for fund driving. And at the very least, since we're struggling with our fund drives, it's worth experimenting with and seeing, you know, if it can help our financial situation. That's all.
Thank you, Brother James. Just real quick, the Pacifica National Board did pass a motion to have special programming on the birthday of formerly H. Rap Brown from the Black Panther Party, who is now known as Iman Jami Alamin, on October the 4th. So that's going to be rolling out. Andrew, I'm going to go to Rachel because she may have a response. Rachel, then I'm going to go to you, Andrew.
Yeah, just real quick. Yeah, that was my thing in the chat, because that's what happened with Hurricane Maria. I literally pulled over and I said, gosh, I'm so glad that I'm able to give right now through KPFK to that. So that might be really good. Also, just always a shout out for the youth. Could there be any maybe more youth programming, and that would get both kind of parents and, you know, and youth excited, and maybe more like beat reporting, you know, where you're on the street, you're at things, you know, including like sunrise movement kind of, you know, or, you know, just all the things that are happening on the streets. You know.
Thank you. There was a motion passed at the Pacifica National Board that still not has been implemented. It's called Pacifica in the Streets, and I work with a bunch of youth at the LA Hands Off Cuba, the End the Blockade Coalition. That good thing is that I know Michael will entertain those ideas, because I think it's critical mass that we do that, Rachel. Thank you so much. Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Lawrence. This is a time for open announcement on action.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you. Once again, I want to announce that I've taken upon myself, with the help of Bella DeSoto from KPFK and Mark Leiser from KPFK. 2 years ago, I initiated and coordinated the Pacifica Listener Forum. This was in response to the lack of on-air open discussion between management and the listeners. The Listener Forum, Pacifica Listener Forum, was formed to do independently online open forums, open to all community members of the entire Pacifica network. We have been doing monthly, twice a month, open forums between listeners and amongst listeners, staff, management, and LSB members. We've had on the executive director 2 or 3 times. We've had general managers on. We've had the legal counsel on, and I've been coordinating that myself. Now we've taken a break over the summer to reorganize, and we've come back with the Friends of Pacifica Radio. We are an independent soon to be nonprofit organization, and this is to supplement, not to replace what's going on Pacifica. We will be independently helping Pacifica in 3 ways now, in addition to doing the Pacifica Listener Forum and other ways to educate, inform, and facilitate communication amongst the listeners. We will also be engaging in fundraising in all efforts, as well as doing outreach in the community to let the community know that Pacifica exists in the 5 station areas and line up new members, which is greatly needed through tabling and other ways. If you would like to be involved, please email us at pacificalistenerforum@gmail.com. Once again, pacificalistenerforum@gmail.com, and we will be going around the bureaucracy of Pacifica and taking action immediately to assist Pacifica. Thank you all.
Thank you, Andrew. And Andrew did put that information in the chat. And I just want to mention one thing, that what Pacifica Fightback seeks is not a takeover. We have to be careful when we use words like that. But what we seek is equity, diversity, and inclusion in programming an anti-racist, anti-war platform, anti-imperialist platform. So with that, I'm going to go to Brother Alvaro from the affiliates. Brother Alvaro, I'd like to give you 90 seconds to highlight WMNF.
All right. What I could do is work on finishing the letter that we sent our general manager, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. So it says, Dr. Vanden reiterated that the firing of Rob Lorey, who was our star journalist for 42 years, caused much damage and continues to be a problem for retaining many longtime supporters. Randy, the general manager, agreed, but her answer reflected that there had been very little to no discussion on the subject by her and the WMNF leadership. She said, "We don't think Rob may want to come back." That is what some members of the board have said since they fired him, totally ignoring the fact that they committed a gross injustice and that they must offer him his job back and let him decide if he wants to come back. There's nothing new about Rob under the Randy new administration. Randy expressed personal support for our ideas. She said that she inherited the problems from the previous general manager's actions. We expressed our desire to address and resolve differences, but we question what authority she will have in light of the powerful clique that seems to run the station. And the mostly white and disconnected board of directors is not helpful. Randy, the general manager, complimented Alvaro's work with the Sarasota station WSLR. I've been helping out at WSLR in doing board up. And okay, and about my position, she said that essentially I have hurt their feelings, and I must apologize for having said, essentially having called them out for making changes that hurt the station in by the way of diversity. So thank you.
Thank you, Alvaro. And so we are accepting donations for Pacifica to pay down the special interest payment on the loan. So please donate to your local stations, support the efforts of the local station, of your local stations and the affiliates. With that, I'm gonna go to Nancy Sarabanamatomi, and then I'll get contact information as to how you could get on our mailing list and the such. Nancy.
Yes, please look at the invitation for this town hall from Pacifica Fightback. And I think it's linked to change.org petition. And for our demands, we need a lot of things done. But I would say priority wise, number one, we don't have financial transparency in Pacifica. And as long as this continues, we're going to have this infighting for power. I think we have to put on our published websites, our published stations website, every single donation, the amount, the date, the time, and protect the anonymity of the donor, not say their names. And then every single bill, not just figures on a piece of paper on a spreadsheet, but I mean the actual bills and the actual, yes, it was paid, canceled checks. And then the business manager of each station. Now we have one business manager who's going to control all 5 stations. And this is from KPFT's business manager. Now she's going to control the whole network. And I am really concerned about this. I have known her since 2009. I'm really concerned about this. She's very secretive, does not show us bills. I have seen in 13 years only one
hold on,
bill.
Nancy, please.
This is an open session stuff, it's not secret.
Please don't
open
discuss
point of
that.
order.
Please do
I
not.
did not say a name, but I'm
It
going to say
doesn't matter.
until
Don't disparage somebody that is obviously in the position. Please, that's
I'm
liability.
just saying what is already known. And so until we have the actual donations and the actual bills, we don't have anything. We don't know. We're just believing and trusting. And our charity navigator rating is now down to 1 star. When I started with Pacifica, we had 3. Now we have only 1 star. So if you have this, and the business manager and the manager has to sign monthly, and it's up on the website, people can go and see, oh, here's what I donated, and look at all the other people who donated. They can see other people's donations.
Sum it up.
The way it is now, one person can have a My KPFT account and see how much they donated, but they have no idea of the other people's. So if there's a mistake and somebody finds out and complains, hey, where's my donation? Or what is this? What is that? Then that will be a pressure to the business managers of each station and the managers to be correct, because if their reputation is besmirched, they're not going to get another job and Pacifica's gone.
Okay, thank you.
That pressure is needed. We don't have this pressure. That's the only thing. Once this is done, all this fighting for power, all this craziness,
Sum it up,
pulling
Nancy,
other people's legs, I haven't talked the whole meeting. I'm busy doing chat. I think I have a right to have a little bit more time.
All right,
Lawrence.
don't be moose, people. Practice what you preach. Please go ahead.
You already said that 2 or 3 times. It's not necessary to say it again. I'm just telling the truth.
Finish up.
I'm finished.
Thank you.
This is Serene.
Go ahead, Serene. I'm gonna take you out of the water. Hold on, Lisa.
Yeah, sorry, I'm driving, so I can't raise my hand. 2 things. One is I disagree with many of the things that Nancy has just said, but I'm not going to get into it by detail. I do think we have to be careful how we describe our staff. There are very few places in which being called secretive is considered a good thing. I'm going to let that go. I do want to let people know that we're asking them to support the national office directly. Sure, you should join your station, and all our stations are in pretty bad shape. The LA, Houston, and New York are all operating deficit badly, deep deficits. But the most pressing need, as far as I'm concerned right now within Pacifica, is finding that $48,000 to pay the quarterly interest on the FJC loan, which is used to be 3.2 million, now about 2.1 million, I think, loan. And you can do that at pacifica.org. Once there, you can either use ActBlue or you can use PayPal. So that bill is due on the 30th, which is a week from yesterday. So please, and maybe you can choose an odd amount, like 48 or something. It's, but if you can give anything there, please do. Thanks.
Thank you, Serene. Lisa. And then Michael's going to play the song after that. Go ahead, Lisa. Oh, Nancy has a hand up. Go ahead, Lisa.
Okay, I just want to say that some points of what Nancy pointed out are important to consider. I'm being falsely accused of having attacked the general manager for what he said during open meeting. And any kind of criticism that is provided to the financial issues or to the way financial documents are not handed in on time or sufficient time in advance is immediately looked upon as an attack on the person or on the staff member, when in reality what we're talking about is the process by which things are being done. There has to be the Pacifica National Board, unfortunately, is not exerting enough authority on the different stations that are going rogue, like KPFA. And something must be done where the bylaws are followed, and they're not being followed. That's the problem. And I understand there's a lot more to deal with here, but if we continue looking inwards instead of going out into the community and trying to get the support for the listener supported and donate to Pacifica and provide, I mean, it's going to be kind of hard. So that said, yeah, thank you for providing this support and for this. Oh, my trial, please. I'm not asking for a trial. If there's going to be a trial, then I want it to be public. But there's no basis for what they're accusing me of. And this is just basically a purge. They're going to continue down the line to other people who are dissenters, basically, or people who do not agree with them. So it's not that I'm asking for a public trial. I'm asking that they don't have a trial. But if they're going to have one, then yes, I would prefer it be public. Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa. Nancy, I'll give you the last word before we go to Michael so he can play the song.
Yes, I'm just a board member, and so I'm not on the national board. I don't see and I don't hear, just like all the members, how much we really owe. But I'm doing a ballpark figure of maybe 5 million. Pacifica's in the red because we owe about 2.7 million to FJC for the loan to pay off the Empire State Realty Trust, which price gouged WBAI after 9/11. You know, we needed a place to put our our transmitter. And then what I don't know if these are old figures, 80,000 KPFK's tower rent, 60,000, it may have changed up KPFK's electricity bill, which is very important to keep those archives.
Nancy, we're losing you. Nancy, we're losing you. Put it in the chat, Nancy, because we're losing you. Put it in the chat, please, because you're coming in audible. So please put that information in the chat.
The WBA.
Philip, my dear. Last night I thought was you in
anyway.
Here. Where did you go? Working for good old England, missing out all the action. My dear, do you know? There was a man in the bedroom, wearing your shoe, trying on the royal costume, dipping in the royal perfume. I'm telling you true. There was a man in my bedroom, anxious for a rendezvous, and I thought it was you. He big just like you, but younger. He thick just like you, but stronger. He lingy like you, but harder. He lily like you, but badder. A man in my bedroom, he came on the bed to do, and I took him for you. The palace guards were playing hopscotch in the yard, abandoned the throne. Being with this perfect stranger, the jewel was in danger, for I was alone with a man in my bedroom, loaded with brew. Yes, this malodorous coaching on top of my bed was poaching like a cockatoo. A man in my bedroom, sorry, dear, I misconstrued. when I took him for you. He big just like you, but younger. He thick just like you, but stronger. He lingy like you, but harder. He lily like you, but harder. A man in the bedroom, he came on the bedroom, and I took him for you.
This is Caribbean Vibes.
Thank you, Michael. And let me just report something from the Pacifica National Board real quick. The reason I get hypersensitive in regards to some of the words that I said, and I'm reminded by Chief Crow Dog, former political prisoner and spiritual advisor to the American Indian Movement, that words have meaning. And we are spending over 40% of our money on defending lawsuits that are filed against us in Pacifica. So it's not what you say, is how you are. And there's words do have consequences as I'm reporting to you now. So I just want to be able to put that out front. You know, if I offended anybody, I did not mean that. As one of your license holders on the Pacifica National Board, I have to try to avoid any sense of liability in regards to Pacifica, because we are deeply in the red. We are on the cliff. We are at the edge of the mountain, looking down, trying to find a spot where we could dive into and sustain ourselves. So please, just remember that and contribute to the station, contribute to what Serene mentioned in regards to paying down the interest loan interest payment for FJC, which is right now we own $48,000, and that's due in at the end of this month, which is what, 6 days away. So whatever you can do to contribute to that is appreciated, and also support your station. You don't have to do it monetarily. You could do it emotionally. You could do it spiritually. Whatever you can do, please support your local station and your affiliates. So with that, I'd like to thank all our panelists. I'd like to thank Rachel, Milton, Linda, Fanny, and Lopez. I'd like to thank my co-host, my co-moderator, Sister Tage Graywall, and I invite you to tune into her show, Freedom Now. Pan-African Perspective is an excellent show. She covers Africa and the globe, the planet, if you will. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for participating in this thing. And please, before you blurt out any information, verify and confirm the information. Don't go by what you think it is. Okay? Thank you. I guess we are adjourned. Mike, let me put in the contact. Michael, can you put in the SEMPA link to subscribe to Pacifica Fightback? I'll read it out loud. I'm gonna spell it out so you can have it. It's SYMPA at LISTS, LISTS .riseup.net, and our website is pacificafightback.org. You can email us. Make sure that you put in the Rise Up list, subscribe Pacifica Fightback in the subject line, and check out our website. Again, I'd like to thank everybody for taking your Saturday to be with us. I'd like to thank the panelists for enlightening and refreshing information as to the reason why Pacifica Fightback exists, is to put that content out there. This is the kind of content that would mitigate or eradicate donor fatigue because it's fresh content that's not heard right now. Sister Trace Graywater, is there anything you want to say?
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you to you and also to the panelists. So thank you so much, Brother Lawrence, for facilitating today. And thank you everybody for kind of also with that last question, helping to center kind of how to look at what next steps are and get a closer look at where we're at.
Okay, and I just want to remind everybody that the chat will be emailed to those who have subscribed. The YouTube will be posted. And anything else? Michael, is there anything you want to say on the way out?
Congratulations, Michael.
Michael Novick, is there anything you
Yeah,
want to say?
thanks. I appreciate everything that people have. Am I still muted? No.
No.
I've been listening very closely, and we will share the chat and the transcript. And I look forward to getting all the help I can get. I think that KPFK and the whole foundation are in a really critical financial situation at this point, and we have to turn it around, and we will.
Right on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, siblings. Have a great day. Stay hydrated and stay safe. Stay safe.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care.
Have a great day.
Ciao, ciao.
Forward ever, backward never.
Gracias.